Hopefully we're live. Hello everybody. This is a slightly unplanned Ask Me Anything. Quite clearly we were supposed to be this evening with the lovely Lore Master of Sotek and myself over on the Lore Master of Sotek's channels. Sadly, something has come up meaning that can't happen tonight, so instead I've just decided since I'm here, I'm going to go online anyway. So this is a classic, a standard, an Ask Me Anything. If you've got a burning question about anything at all, tonight is your night. Settle in while I drink. Apparently I'm sponsored by 7-Up this evening, which, because I've got a green screen behind me, looks super cool. Look at that. Woo, you can see through my face. Anyway, hopefully you can all hear me. If you can't, somebody post a message saying that I'm just like that, and we'll get that settled in. Let's start off with Captain Magma. Hiya, Captain Magma. Pyro, thank you very much for the super chat. Currently finishing up my master's thesis, but I wanted to pop in and show support with a question. Thank you. Is a Dark Deeds expanded universe and tabletop RPG in the cards for the future? It isn't. We do have a RPG and tabletop universe in plans for the future, but it's not a Dark Deeds one. Dark Deeds is a game that was built by Andy Chambers and Mark Gibbons originally for the first edition, and it uses a world that they built. And for the stuff that we're building for the Rookery, we'd rather use a world that we built. But that doesn't mean that Dark Deeds can't take place in there if you wish to do so. It's a super fun world after all. We do have a spiritual successor to Dark Deeds, which we may mess around with, but that depends entirely on how well Dark Deeds does. On that, if you haven't bought Dark Deeds already, there's almost certainly a link down in the chat. Hopefully somewhere, in fact it won't be in the chat, it'll be in the video description if you're watching on YouTube. If you're watching on Twitch, it might magically arrive if Hawk happens to be there. If not, it's not gonna happen. So yeah, other than that, let's carry on. I will be talking a little bit about Dark Deeds a little bit later, but for the moment, let's dive in with our questions. The Afterlife stream is cursed, you're right. So we were supposed to be doing a stream about the Afterlife this evening over on Sotek's channels, and I was quite looking forward to this one. It's going to be a really fun stream, and I'm going to chat about it a little bit just so that you know what's coming. The reason that we were doing it on Wednesdays rather than doing it over on our standard Lorebeard Sundays is because the Warhammer Afterlife is a hellhole of contradictory nonsense, some of which is very nice and cleanly stated, and it says it is this way. Then you get your next book and it says no, it is this way, and that's great for in-world fiction, but it's super difficult for someone like us to come along and try to explain it. Worse, large chunks of it are just simply missing. Nobody's written it up ever, meaning that we're going to have to, unlike normal, actually start adding some flesh to the bones of what the afterlife means. So this will be a stream that's both lore related and also we're kind of making it up and building our own version of it too. So it's going to be a mixture of the two, which is why we decided to do it on Wednesday rather over on the Sunday. Anyway, back to the question. Would you rather be a Demon Prince, a Mortar, or a Mortarch of Nagash? You must pick one. So Mortarch of Nagash. Oh crap. You could be a Mortarch of Nagash and still retain most of what is you. So a Mortarch of Nagash is probably a better option than a Demon Prince, where arguably you are entirely subsumed and taken into the chaotic entity you become, and for all they may appear to have individual personalities, it's very likely they might not. So the safer bet for me would probably be Nagash, but I personally would not like to be either, because Quinn, thank you very much for the super chat. Let's just bring that up there. Have you ever done something story-wise that has made Lindsay mad at you for the night, inspired by how my wife made me furious with a plot twist? Oh, hell yeah. A number of times Lindsay has gone in a big grump because she wants to know the next part of the story, but we're at the end of a session, for example, or something she really wanted to happen didn't occur, and it just left her really, damn it! And sometimes it's difficult to remove our real world emotions from the in-game emotions, which is often, depending upon your preference for different roleplay theories, called bleed, where one life bleeds into the other life. And it's all too often that can occur, and that's often the best time to take a stop, take a break, perhaps have a discussion about what's going on, and try to create some sort of distance between the player and the character. But yeah, is my answer to this one. A very big, strong, heavy, yeah. This has happened more than once. Aha, wait a minute. Wait a minute. We may have a Sotek. We may, let me just double check. Right, while I'm doing that, I'll move on to the next question. I'm tapping to Sotek in the background as well as we pop over to Quinn again. How does the Cabal recruit? Having trouble seeing how people warm up to joining if they never speak and communicate telepathically from what I read. Yeah, there's some writing about the Cabal which is quite clearly nonsense, because often writing when it comes to background is given in deep absolutes, as in they always do this or they always do that, and they forget that they're often very real people who do very real things and engage with others in a very real fashion. I'm also sitting here watching what Sotek's writing in the background. So the answer to this one is exactly how you'd expect them to. This whole only communicate telepathically is a nonsense in terms of practicalities of real life. I might even write up a nice little article about it, because I remember an age ago discussing this with Marianne, who wrote the Liber Chaotica books and Liber Necris et al. And did quite a lot about the Cabal through that. We had some pretty good discussions about that and about the different colleges of magic and what was happening. But broadly speaking, it's exactly as what you would expect. They have got what they believe is a very strong message about magic and how it should be handled. And they believe that it is worthwhile committing to their particular cause, which, of course, for those of us who know what the full cause is, may not necessarily agree with signing up to it. Mornington Crescent, something that genuinely interests me in games is fashion. I agree, me too. And I'm not even joking here. I really get behind costume design and how it can be used. Which of the Imperial Provinces has the best fashion, barring Sylvania, which obviously wins? So I did quite a lot of crazy stuff with Sylvania. So Sotek saying he's happy just joining in with the Ask Us Anything. So this could turn into a both of us Ask Us Anything. Sure. Let's do that. It's going to turn into an Ask Us Anything. Just give me a second while I tap the Sotek. That'll do. It's very likely he'll arrive at any moment. Each of the provinces does have its entirely own unique fashion choices. Much like in the real world, if you move around the different parts of Europe, you'll find that they all have got their own traditional dress. They've all got their different types of dress. I'm just laughing at Sotek in the background here. Different ways of presenting themselves. And in exactly the same way, the different imperial provinces have the same. But the background, as in the actual lore that's been written, doesn't go into this in any great depth. There's really only been 2, 3, maybe 4 provinces where this is dealt with any real detail. One of them is Averland, and really only Averheim. Indeed, they have an entire god dedicated to this called Dahagli, the god of fashion. There's an actual god of that. I know, because I added that god. And Dahagli works out of Averland, and Averland is absolutely famous for its massive, over-the-top, brightly coloured clothing options, particularly amongst the nobility and amongst their horse lords down in the south, many of whom have got some crazy clashing schemes. And they're based very loosely off the Landsknecht that we got in the real Holy Roman Empire back in the day, mercenaries who ended up with so much cash that they just embellished their outfits to a ridiculous degree. And to a certain degree, that's been pushed over onto Averland, largely because the very first paint jobs for Marius Leitdorf were totally over the top, and they decided that all Averlanders were like that, and as each version of Averland was written after that, it got a little bit bigger and a little bit better. Loosely speaking, Averland has become the centre of fashion, and a lot of that goes down the river to Nuln, where Nuln becomes, if anything, the centre point of really the life of the empire for many. It is the destination for most nobles and most parties, with the Countess of Nuln sitting at the top of that particular party time ladder. And the fashions of Nuln spread out everywhere. They do all sorts of crazy stuff. Nuln fashion is discussed in a few places, and it takes what you would imagine from standard imperial history, so to speak. Oh, I'm going to get my headphones because it's very likely Sotek might be joining me. It takes what we know already of historic Renaissance fashions, and it basically modernizes it. And by that I mean they take everything we know and they take it further. Much like all Warhammer is dialed up to 11, Nuln fashion is also dialed up to 11, with the Countess of Nuln dialing it even up to 13 or 14 sitting at the very top. So think of standard fashions, but strip out center dresses, drop the bodices even further, basically up everything. And because the Countess is the driver of fashion, many of the male fashions follow what would normally be perceived to be female fashions. It's far more androgynous because of this. So many of their clothes have got dropped open fronts. So lots of chesty outs for those who are following fashion rather than going with a more staid approach. So Nuln fashion is discussed to a degree, and it's basically everything you know from the Renaissance gone mad. We also have Reichland fashion, which is known in many respects to be the standard wide dresses for the women, classic wide trousers, big broad shoulders for them with big puffs. They are the almost classic archetypical close to Renaissance style fashion. And then as we move up into Middenland, that fashion goes back in time closer to the medieval era. So most of the Middenheim fashions are generally described as being a little bit closer to what you'd expect to see in real world medieval times. Beyond that, it just turns into a big, yeah, they wear clothes, and it's just the classic Empire puffs and slashes. And if it's over in the east and the north, it tends to be a poorer example. If it's down in the south, it tends to be a richer example, or over in the west. So there's not a great deal, but the best fashion of all of them is Averland, which was a long way of saying Averland's a great place to go if you want to be a fashion designer. Magladroth44, hiya, so delighted to see you dropping by. Building up my OG Mortax, and is there a Necrotech or Construct Mortark inside the Black Pyramid? Explains why Sceptra doesn't occupy it, destroy it. I think that could work really well if you wish to do so. There's not one, as far as I'm aware, that has been written anywhere. Give me a moment to dredge my memory for details from inside there. Not a lot, but it would definitely make a certain amount of sense. At the Black Pyramid, we had Arkan. He did his thing there. Cetra didn't, because, yeah, scary man. I'm not aware of anything in there, but yeah, I think that would certainly be something that would work out really well. Maybe ask Sotik when he pops up, just in case he has a different idea. Cole Patterson, with the new Cathay artillery, oh yeah, the Dreadquake, we clearly need a cannon louder career for ogres. It doesn't feel like something they love doing, though. Yeah, loader career, I assume you mean, rather than the louder. And you know what? I think that there is definitely something for ogres that are being used to support engineering marvels. I imagine that could very easily just be covered by the standard artillerist careers that get made. But I definitely think that the ogres should have access to it. You tend to find the ogres on a first blush get ignored with most career options, because everyone goes, ogres can't do that, can they? Like, for example, man cannons. But the answer is, well, yeah, they're used all the time, particularly because they are so strong and can carry things that other species simply can't. And that really stands for big, huge balls of whatever the hell you're going to fire at your opponent. So, yeah, I agree. Definitely should have a career for that. Hutchins! Great for you to drop by. Lawmaster Andy. Yes, Hutchins. Chaos Dwarves. Eee. What would you like to see included if there was a book focusing on them in Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay 4? E, both as antagonists as possible player characters. Praise be to Hushut. So, if we were doing Chaos Dwarves, the obvious answer would be everything. One of the easy things to do with the career system as it currently stands is that with just the tiniest amount of tweaking, I see someone coming! With just a tiniest amount of tweaking, you can create almost any creature fit with almost any species. Soldier just transfers straight over, for example. So what I would do is I would use all of the existing careers and show how the small tweaks are required to turn them into Chaos Dwarf equivalents, and then add a bunch of obvious unique stuff for your demon engine creating weirdos that are the Chaos Dwarves, along with their special religious aspects and their own magic and all their own goodies. Laura for Shut would be pretty damn awesome. Just the idea of that makes me smile. Hi, Sotek.
Hello. Sorry, it's we had a Wrath of God storm last night, and it's been a day, just making sure, picking things up, and anyway, I'm here now.
Good. I'll finish off with this one.
I'll just leave it at that.
So, as antagonist, you'd be looking for a host of not just potential stories that could be used to show how Chaos Dwarves can influence the Empire in particular, because most people play with the Empire. So you'd be looking for a bunch of story seeds and discussions for how they can work there. You'd be looking for a bridge, i.e. something that allows contact to the other side and back again, so that you can build some really cool stories that move over the World's Edge Mountains down to where the Chaos Dwarves are. And then on the player character side, you would just be looking for a complete setup with at least, I would say, around about 10 unique careers that cover the complete gamut of what Chaos Dwarves can do. So that'd be 10 pages at the back of unique careers, with a page before that explaining how to use the existing 64 career paths that are already there. So that's 256 careers that are inside the core book, and how you could use that for the Chaos Dwarves as well. Some of them won't fit, a good chunk of them won't fit, but most of them will. So how to best apply that over. Right. Great to see you, Sotek.
Yeah. Apologies for being late. It's been a day. It's been a day. But
worry not. So we will pick up with the Afterlife next Wednesday over on Sotek's channels. So watch that space. We'll be doing that next Wednesday. Other than that, it's now an Ask Us Anything. So I will let Sotek take over for the next one. I'll just lean back and go, oh, this is easy now.
This one seems very Andy coded though. My party
doesn't it?
Yeah. My party have started the Hawk of Mackinson plot, and there's a Tomb King who's made his way there through the Empire. Is there any fantasies that locked to the Eternal? They're not like us, war 24/7. How would that go for him? Would he be relatively okay, or would he get hounded the entire way through the Empire? Hawk of Mackinson plot. I wish I knew what that was.
You're basically asking, would a Tomb King find it easy to move through the Empire? Yeah, nah. It depends entirely on the Tomb King, but if he's the classic, I'm a Tomb King, look at me come with all my soldiers, yeah, it's trouble time. If he's going to be, if he's going to be all quiet and sneaky, sure, he could do the Dracula thing. Sneak in by boat, do some dubious Tomb King things, he'll be fine. It depends entirely on the story you're building, General Caster. I'm not sure what the Hawk of Mackinson plot is. I feel like I should know what this is.
Yeah, I will say that as well, that if he's a typical Tomb King, no, it would be noisy and horrible, and he's going to pretty much kill everybody that he runs into. But if you want to make him a very unique Tomb King, who actually
the Hawk of Mackinstein. Yes.
Who actually bothers to like cloak himself and be like a little bit subtle, then the Empire's full of a bunch of weirdos. So
yeah, I agree. I mean, if he's willing to hide himself, there will be lots of ways that he can get through without too much difficulty. But if he's a classic Tomb King, I would, of all things, because Warhammer often dials itself up to silly a little bit, I would perhaps, instead of referencing Dracula, which is on the more morbid side, reference the Mummy instead, and take a look at the Mummy and just how much of an impact that one individual makes. So I'm talking about not the recent Tom Cruise Disaster Zone. I was thinking more of the 90s Mummy, which is a little bit more humorous, but also potentially a good guide for the fact that once that Tomb King gets going, the entire city could end up being affected and in trouble.
Yeah, there are actually a couple really classic stories in Warhammer Fantasy already of people accidentally taking Tomb Kings back with them to the Empire and Bretonia. And then the Tomb King wakes up. It's really bad for everyone involved. So you can easily play around with those if you want.
Super true. Niskar, thank you very much. Favorite lesser demon? Best related game memory with said lesser demon? Ooh, that's a toughie. I'm not going to be an arse and say, oh, the lesser demon that I made when I was 16 with the rules inside the Realms of Chaos book, because I made my own god with my own lesser demons. They were better than the real ones. Yeah, no, I'm not going to do that. I have, this may sound ironic, but I have a soft spot for daemonettes. And I've a soft spot because they're so badly used in many writings about them, where they are often made female and they're not. They're daemonettes and they're much more than that. It's I have a soft spot. Mom's gonna get your pills. I have a soft spot for them because I'm often in a position when I was doing official work having to write back to writers and say, yeah, you done it wrong. We need to be significantly broader in terms of how this is being described and what's being done with it. My favorite game related memory with demons. That's a tough one. Have you got one?
I mean, probably my favorite. So, I will say that when it comes to lesser demons, I'm definitely a Plague Bearer stan. I love Plague Bearers, especially because there's a lot of complexities in their story that they have a lot of interesting character compared to other demons, as far as like from a zoomed out perspective, with the idea that they are very often described as being particularly miserable, as opposed to most of the other Nurgle demons, which are very like joyful and bounding. Like they seem genuinely despairing, and also like they're counting constantly, like they have this weird job that they're doing, and that so many of them, like a disturbing amount of them, were once people, which makes it like so much worse. But my favorite memory involving lesser demons is, I typically played lizardmen in tabletop, so for me there is literally no better joy in life than when you would slam up against some giant block of I was at a tournament once, and it was a duo tournament, and we were fighting these two guys who, to put it very, very gently, were just dicks, and would run double demons in 7th edition, which demons were horribly busted, and they had this giant block of Plague Bearers with like a bunch of heralds in it to make the unit basically invincible. And my duo partner was a high elf, and we managed to slam into the unit and do some damage where I like caught him in the front with the Stegodon, he caught him in the side with some Dragon Princes, but we couldn't kill like 50 Plague Bearers. You just couldn't. But we won the leadership, we won the combat, so he did his leadership thing. And he failed the first time, but he only failed by a little bit. So he re-rolled for his BSB, and then he rolled a 12. Oh, bless. The whole unit just popped out of existence, characters and all. It was like, there it goes. There's karma.
Absolutely right, beautiful. Hey, Ricky Chapman, thanks very much. If you got to write a book in the style of the Liber Chaotica, for those of you who don't know out there, the Liber Chaotica is a multi-author book set within the Warhammer world. So that's a book that's written by people in the Warhammer world about chaos. What would you make it about, and from whose perspective?
I still have this in my brain from the last Lorebeards. I would do one about greenskins.
Greenskins do have a big gap, don't they? And we need it.
I would just have it where each of the big chapters focuses on different like of the cultures. And the nice thing is that you could also have the book, just like the Liber Chaotica, some of the parts would jump to 40k. Where like you get to the end of a particular chapter and it would jump to 40k, and then there'd be like a 40k specific chapter at some point that talks about the different groups. But the other thing that would be nice about that is I would probably, in kind of classic Warhammer fashion, have it be some kind of imperial scholar, but that he either starts off interviewing various greenskins, or he gets captured by greenskins, and he's given a bizarre opportunity to interview them, kind of leaning into like the Skarsnik storyline, where Skarsnik likes to keep people alive. So you could talk to like I would probably, for me personally, I would love that he gets taken in by Gorfang Rockgut. That Gorfang sees a use for him as this great king and keeps him in, and he gets to deal with the likes of Gorfang and Skarsnik. So you get like the horrors of all the greenskin stuff, but he also is writing lots of truths, and then he's interviewing greenskins. So you get to have that fun element of, because it's all in universe, not everything he says is necessarily 100% accurate or reliable, because he's going through like a horrible experience, just like the Liber Chaotica. If you read through it, it's a fantastic book, but it's all in universe perspective, so it could all be bullshit, which I like. But I would probably do that.
So for me, it would be, since we've got the greenskins covered, greenskins are a gaping hole because, as we discussed in our last stream about the greenskins, there's so much about them we don't know in Warhammer, and we should know in Warhammer. For me, it'd be the elves. The elves need to be tackled, and we have some big, massive lore holes in the elves, whether it's the Everqueen, whether it's exactly how the Everqueen works, the fact that every one of them carries the curse of Inarian and it's not really being covered. That needs to be resolved. What the elven princedoms are, and how does the Everqueen and the Phoenix King work? Because if we go by what's written, it actually doesn't at all. In any way, shape, or form. It's completely broken. The lore is a big snapped twig of nonsense. So that needs to be resolved. I would probably take it from the perspective of Teclis. Teclis, who has his own slightly skewed and different view of the elves anyway, because he is someone who was raised as a broken thing. And he has significantly less, let's say, good words to say about his own people than many of the high elves would. He's got a unique view, which I think would be very interesting to bring, particularly when he brings that potentially acidic view over onto his brother, what's happening with the high elves, and of course his relatives that rule over in the dark elf lands and over in some of the wood elf lands. So there's lots of really cool shit that we could dive into. But more importantly, from the perspective of us who love our lore stuff, it's not just we get to finally nail down how bits of broken lore work. We can expand outwards, discuss the gods and how they actually apply to all of the different types of, all the different kits of the elves, but also speak to all the other places the elves are. You'd need a very, very strong narrative through run through it. So probably discussing the Phoenix Kings and the rulers of the kingdoms is a nice clean one for doing that. But I think with some brainstorming, you might come up with a better one, because that splits it easily into various ages with the different elven stories in their own blocks. And it makes it relatively easy to break it down. And then you have a narrative with Teclis saying, I think it's this. And by the end of it, he thinks something else. And he's got some big lore drop at the end that he does. But that should be knocked out when you actually figure out what should be in the book.
Yeah,
I think that'd be fun.
I could see for that book the ending being something along the lines where he drops a subtle hint about the whole like figuring out Malekith is supposed to be the Phoenix King or something,
totally.
But like, and he's like, I don't, like we're doomed.
Indeed, or even that Morelian should have been king. And wasn't, and why, and a whole bunch of fun, cool, exciting mysteries from the elven past. Not dark elf past, not high elf past, not wood elf past, but all of their pasts and how much of an influence it's had going out. It could be quite a fun book. Captain Magma Pyro comes in and says, one more question before I pop back out. Are there any Warhammer characters that are just complete rip-offs of Sauron?
have you met our Lord and Savior Nagash?
Not unlike Games Workshop to rip off Tolkien, looking at the Witch King of Angmar, Nagaroth. Yeah. Nagash it has elements. The Witch King
it's not a one-for-one.
Elements. Even Drachenfels has elements. I mean, Drachenfels is more of a pastiche of Dracula than he is the good old Witch King. But really, the Witch King of Nagar, whatever. Yes, is the answer to this. I don't think there's much else to say on that. I mean, it's pretty obvious. There's clear, obvious, not copy-paste, but influences there. Unlike many of Warhammer's background, which are just copy-pastes. They have just taken an idea, and they've taken it straight over, and they might have changed a letter, or in some cases, Malekith, not changed the name at all. Malekith, the witch thing of the Dark Elves. Marvel says, what? So sometimes they just take it straight over. Other times it's an entirely new idea wrapped up with some ideas that have come from different places. But the answer is yes. Basically.
Yeah, luckily, most of the pretty heavy ripoff characters tend to be more historically focused, but some of them, there are the occasional ones that are just upped and I mean Malice Darkblade is also really kind of infamous for being basically just what's his face,
Elric.
Yeah, Elric from the Michael Moorcock's writings. Like they are hilariously similar.
And yeah, it's like a very simple version of Elric, which when I remember when it came out, I was like, really, yeah, really, this is happening. Okay, fair enough.
Maglejaw, similar to Captain Magma, any ripoffs of Morgoth? So Tolkien's gods are very, 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 very Catholic coded, which tends to not translate nearly as well into Warhammer Fantasy. So I would say not super really. I don't think there's like a singular grand corruptor. There's not like the devil in Warhammer Fantasy as much, especially when you get into the whole thing of like how he corrupted the earth and was like there and got stabbed by somebody and yada yada yada. Warhammer gods don't work that way, would be the way I completely put it.
In fact, agreed hard. If you want to see where the Warhammer gods were based on, look to different fantasy realms. In particular, what we've already mentioned, Michael Moorcock, the gods of chaos came from Michael Moorcock. He had an entire hierarchy of gods like Zeombarg and Ariok, who were just different gods of the hells, gods of chaos. But they don't have this singular focus that the Warhammer gods have. The Warhammer gods are less chaos, small c, and more chaos, just chaos, because they're not really chaotic, in truth. They're not random. They're not all about change. Even Tzeentch isn't really all about change. He's the great architect. He's the great builder in some respects as well, where the gods over on Michael Moorcock's side, the chaotic gods, were all about constant, infinite change, always roiling and twisting things into something new, which is why mutation was a core of what they were. They took something you expected and twisted it into something else. And if you ever went to a chaos realm, if you didn't have something of law to effectively hold back the chaos, you would just melt into the world around you and join the ongoing chaos. It's proper broken over there. Warhammer is much, much simpler, but it takes a lot of that over. So yeah, not really the right place to find out left copy-paste from Morgoth.
Captain Magma, currently finishing up my master's thesis. I wanted to pop in the show and show support with a question. Is a dark deeds...
We've done it. We've done
you've done it.
We've done that one. We did that at the beginning, didn't we, Captain Magma? We are on that one, I think. Oh, we're on that one. That one. That's where we are, I think. Yes, we are. Quinn, where do you rank the Dragon Children's power? Could they reliably kill a greater demon, even if it's a tough fight? I'll give my answer to this with a different question, which is, what's the power of a greater demon? The power of a greater demon is as inconsistent as the winds of magic itself. A small greater demon summoned in a summoning circle, a tiny amount, a small fragment of its power, trapped into the Warhammer world in a form, it's maybe 10 to 12 foot tall. The dragon children are going to probably eat those for breakfast, as powerful as they may be. But if we're talking instead during one of the great incursions of chaos, where greater demons can be enormous, far bigger than the dragons. Now we're talking danger. Might take multiple dragons to take one of those down, at least easily. It's not going to be easy under any circumstance, because they can get enormous when the gates wax in power and magic floods across the world. So the question, I think, is better answered with, how big a greater demon are they facing?
Yeah, I will simply say they fought in the Cataclysm, and apparently most of them walked out of it, so probably yes. You know what? I'm gonna let you decide which ones are next because mine, for some reason, is in a different order than yours is.
Magladoth. Sotek, what do you think of my Mortark idea super?
Did you ask? So you asked building up my OG Mortarks, and there's a Necrotech or Construct Mortark inside the Black Pyramid.
Yeah, that was it.
Yeah, I mean that's cool. That's awesome.
Yeah.
That would be a fun. Yeah, that would be a fun. The Black Pyramid. Yeah, the Black Pyramid has always kind of been one of those funny things where, if you look at it and you really think about, especially what Cetra is like, it's really like I feel like Cetra would have torn this down at some point over the last 4,000 years. It seems a little. That has always been kind of an interesting blank space that he would not have tried to destroy it. So I think having a story that explores why specifically he's allowed this thing that is literally a dick measuring contest against his own pyramid and is bigger than his, which he would not tolerate. I think there's a story there that is great to explore.
I agree. In fact, I don't just agree in this. I think it's worth paying some extra time on it because the only obvious reason that we have is religion. And religion is very important, obviously, to the Nehekarans, and tearing down such things could be seen as irreligious. But, and let's be relatively blunt about this, who cares? Nagash sucks. I mean, sucks. Dude should be dismantled. His name should be taken down and defaced from every pyramid across Nehekara. He should be unwritten. His name should be removed, and that pyramid should be down. And the fact that pyramid isn't down is, I think, a story that should be told. Because, hell yeah. Just a small one there from Magladroth on the side as well. Subscribe to Andy's channel so we can find out why he hates Gelt. If you didn't know, we are going to be doing ourselves a stream about Gelt if I ever reach over on my channel 10,000 followers. I have literally no idea how many we have, which is why I'm clicking furiously in the background, realizing I'm in the wrong account. So let me just open this up with the right account.
While you're actually, you are at 8320.
Oh, so only 1,700 to go. So yeah, do make sure you go and subscribe to the YouTube channel for LAWhammer, because when we reach 10K, we will be discussing Gelt the deck. And I'm quite looking forward to doing that. Question. Yeah, what's that?
Which is, how are we doing on the board game reviews?
Oh, that's a good question. Last I checked, let me just pop over there. Now, here's one for you all. Dark Deeds has got a little write-up on BoardGameGeek.com, and on BoardGameGeek.com they've got an area for doing reviews, and apparently when you reach 100 reviews something happens. I don't know, they do something with their algorithms or whatever it is. And Dark Deeds currently is standing at, as I bring it up, no, that's the supplement Darker Deeds. Oh, I pressed the wrong link. Dark Deeds, 2nd edition, here it is, has got 88, which means we only need 12 more reviews to reach our 100. And if we reach our mighty 100, we got a little bit of fun news we'd like to tell you. It's only 12 reviews away from that. So if you've got the game and you'd like to review it, or, you know, you just want to drop a review on, pop over to Dark Deeds 2nd edition. I'll drop it into the chat as a link. I can do that because I am God and King of the chat. And hopefully that's popped up down there. He says,
yes,
scrolling down
I
there
would
mad.
really like to give that announcement today. So
Yeah,
if 12 of y'all could just take a minute to go do that real fast, that would be super cool. Just 12. Just 12. It's not that many.
It's not that many. Not many at all. So yes, Charles C.K. The better justify classical or just because it's cool? How might you build up a Roman Empire, ancient Tilia, Aka, Rome, part of the old world history? So to better justify classical. Now, if you don't know out there, classical is one of the foundational languages of the old world. It takes the place in the real world of Latin and also Greek, both of them. It doesn't just do one, it sort of does both. And the language classical that's spoken today is the language that was imported into the Empire by traders from Tilia around about the time of Sigmar. And the very first books that are written in the old world are written in classical, and most of the original texts of, say, the Deus Sigmar, which is the god Sigmar, are written in classical as well. So classical is a deeply important language for all the religions of the old world for a variety of different reasons. And one of the things that many people do is try to build up an equivalent of the Roman Empire from Remus. So pulling on the idea that Rome was founded by Romulus and Remus, instead go to Remus and say there was a Roman Empire and do that instead. And a lot of the miniatures kind of reflect this. If we take a look at the Dogs of War miniatures, many of those have got a very strong Roman influence. Also, if we take a look at a lot of the Skaven miniatures, many of them also have a lot of Roman influence, and there's a reason for that, because the Skaven Blight, the capital, is inside Tilia, inside the area of Tilia in the marshes in the north. And they have taken on many of the influences of the peoples around them. So they've got a bit of a Roman influence too. And is it worth building a Roman Empire? We've kind of discussed this in the past. I won't wax lyrical on it more than say that I think building the story of Myrmidia into this would probably make for a really good story, and showing when Myrmidia came back and bound Estalia and Tilia together into one enormous empire that expanded into the Border Princes as well. And it lasted for her lifetime until eventually she was killed. And then when she was killed and returned back to the realm of the gods, it sort of collapsed and eventually becomes the city-states of Tilia and the kingdoms of Estalia. So I would probably wrap it into that and possibly even have a burgeoning Roman Empire equivalent before her arrival, because the original story of Myrmidia suggests that she was born into a world where slavery was the norm and she was sold as a slave. So it would very much fit into that Roman feel. So I think having a lovely classical Roman Empire style small beginning and having it battered up by Myrmidia and turned into something much bigger might be a good way of doing it.
Yeah, 100% agree on all that. The only other thing I would add is, we kind of talked about this a little bit in the Gorbad as well, is tying it into having like an ancient Greece around like where modern day Myrmidons is, kind of like that part of the border, the more western side of the Border Princes that butts up against the vaults. Would also be, I think, a really good idea for the overall world building. This one's always one of those annoying, tricky things, because like unless we get like a Dogs of War or Talea army book, it's something Games Workshop themselves will probably never really expand into, because they build their lore around the minis as opposed to allowing the minis to flesh out the lore, which is unfortunate, but that's just the way they do things.
Yeah, agreed. Ricky Chapman, we were wondering, can Chaos Warriors have kids? Sigvald could do the deed, but he didn't have kids that we know of. So can they impregnate or be impregnated?
Yes.
Yes, definitely. It's one of the things that always really, really, really amused me about 40k. It just, why the hell are they so focused on men for their Chaos Space Marines? I mean, why? It makes literally no sense, particularly when you're dealing with, say, Slaanesh and the various Space Marines on that side. Why are they still all men? It literally makes no sense. They're all about chaos, both big and small c. Nonsense.
Thank you, Queek.
Oh, thank you, Queek. Hugely appreciated.
And Ka-chow. Thank you.
Oh, wow. Ooh, I'm going to go over and double check what the numbers are at. While we're at it, we are now at 93. We only need 7 more reviews, and we've hit our big 100. We're almost there. That's so awesome. Okay, heading down to Quinn. As a wizard apologist, I mean, aren't we all? How could I maximize the number of wins I can channel? Oh, dear. Oh, we're moving straight into mighty illegal area. Suffused with chaotic blood, which, what else? Not a chaos worshipper, by the way. Oh.
That's what they all say.
So, if we go by the official lore, it's something you're born with. So you could never really, if we're just going with the lore side, change how many you could channel. Very few have the ability to channel more than 1 or even 2 wins. It's just not what most are born with. The spark of magic alone is extremely rare, and even those with the spark of magic can often only channel like small smatterings of it, and they'll never pass and become full magisters in the Empire, for example. But those who can focus on one. It is possible you could have more than one. Volans, for example, somewhat famously, probably could channel all 8 winds of magic when he founded the Colleges of Magic, and then focused only on Heish for the rest of his life. So that was just the white wind of magic for the rest of his life. So if we're going purely by the lore, you couldn't maximize the number of winds. Now, if we're flipping it over and saying, actually, no, I mean by the rules. Okay, thanks, bye. Screw the lore. I want all the fucking winds of magic, and I want them now. When you're playing Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay, every single character is assumed to have the spark of magic within them. That doesn't mean that every single PC is a wizard. It just means that if you're playing a PC and you decide you want to become a wizard, that career is not held off for you because the lore says, oh, very few people can be wizards. No, if you want to become a wizard, go become a wizard, and how your group handles that is up to you. Whether that's going to be going through witch careers or whether you're going through a wizard career and a more formalized education with the Colleges of Magic. But if you go into the Colleges of Magic, you're only going to get one. But that doesn't mean you can't then take the dark magic talent, giving you basically dark magic. Chaos allows you another one straight in there. If you're an elf, you can get them all. But if you're a human, you're now kind of stuck, which doesn't give you another lore of magic. It just gives you access to a spell from another lore of magic and turns it into the lore that you know. So that doesn't give you access to it. And if you're using the chaotic blood stuff, which is a LAWhammer set of rules, suffused with one of the winds also does not give you access to any of the lores of magic. So you're kind of stuck. Your best route is arcane magic. You can only take it once. Dark magic, that's a little bit broader. Chaos magic, you can only take it once. And that's really the only way you can do it as a human. But the lore says you could have more. The rules currently don't properly accommodate for that.
And what I will say is that obviously you can always just say, hang the rules and the lore. And you could do just crazy shit. Like if you wanted, it would depend on what angle you wanted to take. But I mean, if you wanted to make it like particularly messy, I don't know, you could have some kind of weird chaos spawn or creature that like bites you and all of a sudden you're able to tap into things that you weren't before, you know, a la werewolf powers, or you could do that, you know, there's some kind of spirit or deity that's giving you power, whether you want it or not. You could do lots of bizarre, crazy things.
Yeah, totally. I mean, take for example what we do over in LAWhammer. In LAWhammer, one of our core characters is a bit naughty and can channel more than one wind of magic and is part of the Colleges of Magic system. But we built a reason for why that could be the case into his character's background, and it's a background that the novels have also to a degree done, where they've got characters like say Zavant Coniger, who's apparently been through multiple colleges at various times, and with a little bit of stretching and massaging you can make that work. Equally in LAWhammer we've got what counts as the equivalent of magisters at court, that are a very special group that sit underneath a label called Swordfish. But if you want to know more about that, you'd have to watch the streams.
Eli, thank you very much.
Oh, thank you very much. Enormously appreciated. We are now at... we're still at 93 apparently. I don't think Eli's one's hit quite yet, or it was already...
Yeah, so just a reminder, we only need 7 more reviews if we want to spam those links one more time.
I'm just banning them right now.
Yeah,
spam,
if we get
spam
7 more, super easy, super quick, you never have to interact with it ever again. 7 more, we have genuinely a very big announcement about Lorebeards.
Yeah, it's a fun one. I love it. Yeti, Tomb Prince, playable card to when?
In what context?
I'm not sure what I'm supposed to say to this one.
Yeah, I mean, if it's in Wolfrup, they'd have to probably do a Nehekara book, which would be cool. Though I don't see that happening anytime soon.
So I think the odds of that are actually pretty low. The last time that Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay dived deep into Nehekara was probably the Tomb of the Lure of the Light Lord. That was the name of the book.
Yeah.
For Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay 2nd edition. That was based very closely on one of the Black Library novels that dealt with one of the Tomb Kings, but it didn't give any playable character rules. It was very much just a giant dungeon bash in an inverted pyramid, which was super fun for me to map. I had all the fun of my life doing that one, doing lots of weird floors and crazy traps and all manner of nonsense in it, but it didn't bring anything playable. And it's a bit of a shame because it wouldn't have taken much to make a playable set of characters rules at the back. As the gnome rules show in the Rough Nights Hard Days book for Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay 4th edition, that's just 5 pages and I got an entire species in. So you can, with a little bit of this card, you are not wrong. It is nasty.
That's very funny.
One, though, actually freaking
that's
hilarious.
Very funny.
That's a dungeon I've run maybe like 3 times, and only one group I went through, but they did it so fast because they refused to touch anything. They were like, nah, that'll be trapped. Nope, just walking through here very carefully, not touching that, not touching that, not touching that. That's so coming alive, so I'm going to blow that up. Blew it up. It was coming alive. Went down, found a slide.
So they were the protagonists that were aware that they were in a horror movie.
Yeah, 100%. That was one of those rare moments where PCs actually did a good job. It was great. Hot Plight 8. Vampire counts are brought into Old World. Which characters' bloodlines are likely to be central to the edition?
Well, Games Workshop has an unhealthy obsession with von Karsteins. So von Karsteins would be the main characters. That being said, in a perfect world where GW was being interesting and fun, one thing that I would really love is there's a lot that kind of seems to be. There's a good chance that GW is turning their attention to the East. With the introduction of Cathay, and they've been hinting really heavily at things like the Naga and the Hobgoblin Khanate and stuff. Mm-hmm. If they were to come in and be like, look, vampire counts are back with jade-blooded vampires as the starting range, that would be wild in a good way.
That would be wild. Yeah, I agree. Games Workshop, right from the very beginning, with the very first Vampire Counts book, put the Karsteins front and center, and Karstein their way through that book, adding some extra bloodlines, but really not focusing on anything else. When the next Vampire Counts army list came out, Karsteins! Oh, there's all these other ones as well too, but Karsteins! And they have always had the lion's share of the background and the characters. So I think, as much as I prefer it wasn't the case, it's almost certainly going to be the Karsteins. I would like to have something far broader. I mean, Silver Pinnacle's just there. They're playing there. It's just there. Yeah, we'll see if it actually happens, though. Is this the Afterlife stream? Fishman Afterlife?
No, it's my fault.
We will be having the Afterlife stream next Wednesday at 10 p.m. UK time over on Sotex channels, and it will be super exciting. And looking forward to it next week.
If you want to sneak in an Afterlife question for this stream because you're like, well, I have a question now. That's fine. You can do that.
Yeah, feel free. Quinn, are there Nurgling equivalents for Slaanesh and Khorne? So, way back in time, gotta go back in time. When we go all the way back to when each of the gods were codified in the Realms of Chaos books, they were each given a slot for Lesser Demon, Greater Demon, Beast, Mount, and that was pretty much it. And the Nurglings filled one of those slots. So the answer is yes, and the slot is already filled. Slaanesh, they've got their Lesser Demon, which is, of course, their Pincery Daemonettes, their Greater Demon, the Keeper of Secrets, their Mount, the big, long, slippy thing, and their, what's the last one? The
Oh, sorry, of the Lesser Demons?
Yeah, I've lost track of where I was.
Plaguebearer, Horror, Demonette, and...
No, I was going through the Slaanesh Demons, and my brain just suddenly went blue.
Oh, you got your what? You got your Seekers, your Demonettes, your Fiends, and your
Fiends.
Keepers.
Thanks. Yeah. And they do have their own equivalents. So each of the gods have got their own equivalents for each one of those slots. And the Nurglings just filled one of those slots. And they used to carry their palanquins around. And were used as the steed of Nurgle. So they carried palanquins around with their little ones, and they just did it in a slightly different way. So the steed, for example, of Khorne would have been obviously the Juggernaut. So if you want to give an equivalent, the Nurgling equivalent is a Juggernaut of Khorne, which It's funny, but not necessarily what you might first expect.
Yeah. What I will say is, while there's not officially, realistically,
the
there
Zinchi
probably would be somewhere in the world. Oh, yeah, Zinch and AOS got they got brimstone horrors, which are basically the same. They're like little yellow and red horrors.
Yeah, 100%. Why are elf souls doomed to Slaanesh? They still have their gods, unlike 40k. Is there anything they can do to protect themselves, or just fucked?
There are. So this is something that we'll actually talk about in the Afterlife stream as well. But to answer the question directly, there are ways they can protect themselves. There are even some gods that, if they get lucky, can protect them, but it's by no means a guarantee. And even if they do get protected, like the two most commonly noted options are Loic and Erithkial, and being saved by Erithkial is almost as bad as being eaten by Slaanesh, apparently. So it's most elves seem to live by almost a try not to die, or if you're going to die, make sure you have your proper situation in place. Which, like the High Elves, you have your Waystone shards, which allows them to kind of be taken into like a closed, kind of network, like kind of similar to the Eldar 40k, where like they can like be uploaded essentially into the whereas for your wood elves, a lot of wood elves that die become treekin. Like the treekin are literally all elves. There is not a single treekin that is a regular spirit. They are elven dead that have Athel Loren has their spirits go on to possess a dead tree and bring it to life, and they animate it, which is a very unique way to get around it, though all of them come with their own prices. Like the treekin aren't really, because they're not really part of their original body, they're parts of their soul that kind of seem to have faded very significantly, because the treekin are noted to be much lesser than they were as elves. So they all come at a cost. There's no getting around that.
Yeah, and as to why are their souls doomed, it's because they're tasty. And you might go, what the fuck does that mean? And why is that the case? And right. Just stop for a moment. I imagine that you're sitting at your end of the great interweb, all of you, in fact, out there watching just now, and you have favourite food. You have things that taste good. Look, Sotek, right now, he's digging in deep. Everybody has stuff they like. Some things taste different to other things. Elves are uniquely etheric entities. They have souls that are intrinsically linked to the realm of the gods. They are the favourite of the gods for a reason. And that's because they are much more akin to them. The elf soul is, for a demon, super tasty. Think of your favourite food. That's an elf soul. Now let's compare it to a food you really dislike. Something that's bland that you always go, fuck no, I don't want to eat that shit. It's horrible. That's a human soul. Now that human soul needs to be properly spiced. You need to do something to it to make it worthwhile. But this soul, this brilliant one over here, is so freaking tasty that the god of excess herself, she who thirsts, claims them. Now, that doesn't mean that God always gets them. Sometimes she who thirsts is busy doing something else. There is billions, uncounted, etheric loads of demons out there ready to prowl around and eat those elven souls. But still, nevertheless, when the soul pops into the aether, there may be a moment when they're off doing something else. Not every soul goes to Slaanesh. But if Slaanesh has anything to do with it, every fucking soul goes to Slaanesh because they're super tasty. And that's basically it for Warhammer. They don't have any greater story. They don't have any, the elves made Slaanesh and thus, No. It's just that they are the best food there is, and the god of excess has claimed them.
Yeah, and there is and it's kind of like, another way to think of it, if you prefer like a slightly different analogy, is that imagine like if all of the creatures, all the demons and gods and stuff are in like a really dark room, and they're scrambling around for like these little tiny motes of candlelight, and then someone fires a flare gun, and the elf soul is the flare. It's really, really like, it's so different from everything else.
Yep, agreed completely. Quinn, which wind of magic would you use for Dragon Ball Z style attacks? Kame, Ki blast, etc.
That's actually kind of an interesting question.
There's a lot of fire in there, but there's a lot of light in there.
Yeah, so if we're talking about like new lores of magic and stuff, I would actually say the lore of Yang from Cathay is very heavily oriented to that, because it is a very bright, explosive, aggressive lore. That's
the obvious choice, really, isn't it?
Yeah. Because if memory serves, I believe it also has the lore of light and the lore of fire in it, as well as I think it's fire, light, life, and I forget what the fourth one is. But there's like a super aggressive. It's a very aggressive lore. But if you're using only the 8, I'd probably go with Akshi. Though you could make arguments for other ones without struggling very much.
Yeah, I think I agree, but just because of the purity that comes along with a lot of, and the training required for it, I think I might end up leaning to Heish in the end. Because it would
just certainly be much more devastating if it was Heish.
yeah, 100%. Okay, Teo Bonora. Hi, you two. Hi. Could Archaon be a fallen avatar of Sigmar? I have not read the End Times. What was his reaction confronting Sigmar?
Could he be a fallen avatar of Sigmar? That is an argument that people have made. That is even an argument that's sort of presented within universe. So Archaon's story, depending on who you ask, Archaon's story is often leaned very heavily as if he had stayed true as a good guy, he would have been like the big good guy. Like he would have been the guy that would have changed everything and kicked chaos so hard in the gonads that it would have never recovered. But Destiny had other options.
I think it's slightly heavier than Destiny. Dad had issues.
No, yeah.
Without going into great depth here, because it's spoilery-rific gone mad, but you're going to get spoilers when you're dealing with a lore show. This is no. He's the kid of Be'lakor. He's the son of a demon. And I don't think he would ever have been an avatar of Sigmar. Now, is he extraordinary? Yes. Did he become something truly extraordinary? Yes. If he had, because of his own will, decided to, for example, stick with Sigmar through his life and that become the thing, would he become important? Oh, hell yeah. But ultimately, it's always got that seed of corruption in the center of him. And when the seed of corruption is written by the vast majority of Warhammer writers, they tend not to give it nuance, which is a shame, but it tends to be the case, which means he was always destined for what he did, which was destroying the world. So I think the answer from my side would probably be no.
Yeah, and to the second part of your question, as far as his reaction, in the End Times that we got, his reaction is basically denial. It's hard denial of that you are... Archaon literally just cannot bring himself to believe Sigmar is what he is, even when he's literally fighting him. And it's one of the few parts of the last book that I really enjoyed. Was their final confrontation, and it leans well into Age of Sigmar and their relationship there, because they have a very complex relationship in Age of Sigmar. But the final fight between Archaon and Sigmar is actually pretty decent.
All right.
In the End Times, it's very. I'd recommend checking it out at some point if you can. It's covered reasonably well in the little novel. Anyway,
Aaron Strever. Hey, Aaron.
Hello, Lord Beards. Oh, you got it.
Oh, you got it. I'll get.
Just wanted to add something. Watch your 40k versus fantasy, and I would like to throw an interesting that what if Guilliman saved Shinzu, the Light Dragon, and married her, making Cathay a friend like Sigmar did with dwarves? Sure. I mean, if you wanted to continue that storyline and dial it even more up to 12 than we already had, that is a way you could absolutely do that.
Is absolutely. I have nothing more to say other than sure.
Yeah, because I mean,
that could be a story.
Yeah, shape-shifting dragon. I mean, yeah, that's pretty decent as far as wives go.
Hammond, hey Andy, how do you Brits put up with so much rain? The answer to that is, as I move over and double check how many reviews we're up to now, 97. We only need 3 more. 3 more of you out there. Just pop over to BoardGameGeek.com, go to the 2nd edition of the game, not the 1st edition of the game, because
for the love of God, 3 more people.
Ago.
And we can have this stream do something really cool.
Yeah, and how do we put up with it? We're just used to it. It's the way things are. But having said that, though, here in the west coast of Scotland is east coast of Scotland, much less rain than over in the west, where it comes in off the sea, rains over in the east, and by the time it gets over here, most of the rain's kind of given up. Hello, says Pavel. I hope I pronounced your name right. Could you give me indication where I can find more heraldry for Ostland? Not the Arms and Heraldry book then. I'm after Ferlangen and Salkanton. Is there any? Ferlangen, was that in the Arms and Heraldry book?
I don't think so. Because that book is, those books are awesome, but especially for like
I seem to remember Ferlangen was mentioned, Wolfenburg's mentioned. Now, if it's not in the Arms and Heraldry book, that it's not anywhere. Salkalton, I'm pretty convinced hasn't been done because Salkalton wasn't on the studio's map when they were doing the heraldry, and I know that because I got the studio's map at the time. And Salkalton wasn't on, and I gave them a map back. I'm not sure if it ever got to them because it went through a third party, but hey, I gave it back to them. So it's definitely Ferlangen was on their maps though. I don't have the book to hand here, so I can't say. But if you've got the Arms and Heraldry book for the Empire, that's your best option. But yeah, that's it. I don't think it's anywhere else going for Ferlangen and Salkanton in particular. You tend to find that the only heraldry that Games Workshop generally produces is for its primary cities and its primary grand provinces. Then after that, 1, maybe 2, maybe 3 other towns here and there. And only the ones that are generally marked on their map that they would do most of their, let's say, work from. And Ferlangen is included in that. Salkalton isn't.
Yep.
I'm sorry to say. Hammond, Kendrick Lamar, or Drake, who won? Don't care.
Well, one of them is clearly a dragon, so my money's on the dragon, probably.
Dylan, just as a small aside, says the father of almost all fantasy worlds, it seems, is Michael Moorcock. No, Michael Moorcock was writing often as he was writing fiction which was to be different from the standard fantasy of the time, through the 60s in particular. So he is definitely the father of what many would see as the modern anti-hero though, and the concept of chaos he created, as we know it at least, chaos and law and the balance that lies between them. He did do a lot, but he is certainly not the father of almost all fantasy worlds by any stretch, as much as that would be funny to say. Like Lord Chris, hiya. Inspired from recent events, what happens when a Grand Theogenist passes? What rituals, rites are performed, and how is a new one elected?
That's a great question.
That is a great question. In fact, I have written about this for an official book. So I'll let Sotek say something while I literally pull up what I wrote.
So what I would say is that whatever Andy wrote is what you're going to go with, because this is something I often have not thought a lot about.
Yeah, okay, I'm just going to grab it out now. I'm almost on it, so we can say.
And I will say,
happens.
I'm glad that Andy's the one that wrote it, because if anybody else wrote it, it would definitely just be a carbon copy of the papal election process.
So, and it isn't a carbon copy, so at all.
Yeah, because you wrote it.
But I based it on stuff that came before, and it's got similarities to the papal thing. So the Grand Theogenist, we'll just read out the complicated nonsense that involves with the Order of the Torch, which leads to the Cult of Sigmar. So Grand Theogenist is the top, and he's got 2 archlectors that support him. Now, each of those have got an imperial vote to vote in the next emperor. So that's the first thing you need to remember. That's the Grand Theogenist at the top, and the 2 arch-lectors. Each one of those is an arch-lector also. So the Grand Theogenist is also an arch-lector, and they are responsible for 1/3 of the empire each. And underneath them is a whole bunch of other people. So we've got that. We can just skip all the next bit. Next, we have got the arch-adjutant. The arch-adjutant acts as the arch-lector of the area that the Grand Theogenist is responsible for. Because he's too busy leading the entire cult to actually do that part of his job, so he appoints someone to do it on his behalf. So beneath these arch-lectors and the arch-adjutant are 18 lectors, which all form the College of Lectors, the body that advises the Grand Theogenist and selects his replacement. Okay, so 6 high capitulars and 18 lectors join the 18 lectors in ruling a domain of Sigmar and are called lectorics, which is a division of the empire. So there's a big division of the empire between all these people, and these capitulars can join in the vote but don't have a vote. So they get to come in and advise and suggest and argue, but they don't have a vote. So there's the 4 at the top and 18 others underneath. 22 get in together and choose from amongst their number one to become the next Grand Theogenist. That's it.
Yep. And that being said, the only thing I would add to, if you were adding to it, Andy, is do you think there's any particular like blessings or ritual or rite that they would need to go through as the process of becoming the actual G-thong?
The G-thong.
Yeah.
Yes. But it isn't marked. When I was writing the Sigmar section, I had a very small number of pages to get an enormous cult in place. And this back for the Tome of Salvation. And I wanted to do more because the core setting for Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay 2nd Edition was the Empire, and the core deity for the Empire was Sigmar. The same way that if we were doing, say, Tilia, you would want to have a large section on Myrmidia. And I wanted to do that. It hasn't been done, and it isn't there. But would there be deep ritual? Yes.
Yeah, because they take a new name, right? They take a dwarf name, don't they?
They absolutely do. So whatever it is that they do, at the end of it, they take the equivalent of when kings become kings, they take a regnal name. When a pope becomes pope, he takes his papal name. They take on a new name, and the Grand Theogenist does exactly the same thing, takes on a new name. And they take on a dwarf name. And there have been a whole host of dwarfy sounding Grand Theogenists in the past. Many writers forget this though, completely. And you'll find that you've got Johann, the Grand Theogenist. And you're like, no, that doesn't make sense. And there is ways around it. You might go, well, wait a minute, Andy, Volkmar. Volkmar's called Volkmar. That is not a dwarf name. You're right. He's called Volkmar the Grim. He takes a dwarf epithet. So they can add an extra bit. So whenever a Warhammer writer forgets that they're meant to give them a dwarf name, a writer like me can come along afterwards and just go the something and add a dwarf little bit of extra caslid at the back. We've got it fixed and we covered that lore hole. But it has been since the mid 80s when it was late 80s when it was very first written. The Grand Theogenist always takes a dwarf name. And I added an extra bit of lore, which was a dwarf name or an epithet to cover all of the various mistakes that had been made by other writers at other times. And I say mistakes. Different writers, they make their own choices. But I covered that patch so that it made sense with all the existing lore that came before.
All right, but...
oh, you're
if this
joking
is correct...
me. Oh, I'm going to go check myself.
If that's correct, then we have an announcement.
I am pressing refresh and it says, actually, it's not correct. It's 104.
Excellent. So first of all, thank you all very much for supporting Andy and all of his wonderful fellows. Really appreciate that. He can badger whoever it is he has to badger now so that process starts kicking off. But we have a very special announcement, which is that in 2 weeks, this is the first time I am saying this publicly anywhere. In 2 weeks, I am taking a vacation. I am leaving good old Texas behind, and I'm going to the UK because I'm going to go see Andy. So we're going to have an in-person 2 in-person episodes of Lorebeards on a Sunday and Wednesday episode. And I'll also be hanging out and doing some stuff with LAWhammer. So there is going to be a very unique week. So it'll be the episode on the 11th of May, and then the 14th of May will be an in-person Lorebeards, which is going to be super fucking exciting.
It's going to be immense. So at the moment, we've got this big dividing line between us. That line will be gone. There will be no line. There will just be us bearding up together in the same
trying to
space.
fit on one camera.
Yeah, it's gonna be easy. I've already figured out different ways we can set this up. It'll be super awesome. So that's going to be brilliant. And for those of you who are also LAWhammer fans, he will be joining us over on LAWhammer too.
Yeah, it's gonna be super exciting. I am beyond
really
excited.
Looking forward to that. It's going to be freaking the best. So please do join us then, because we are going to have a whale of a time.
Yep. All right.
All right, so where were we? I think we were... okay. Hammond. Which Warhammer character would befriend Obama? And which one would be his enemy? And where would he be best suited? I'll leave that to the Americans to decide.
He would probably definitely be best suited in the Empire. I think he would fit in just fine. With the Empire and Imperial politics, it probably wouldn't be that much.
I disagree heavily. Okay, the Empire is a fascist state and is awful. It's a monarchy of the worst description and a terrible, terrible example of what he would consider
American
to be
cries
standard.
in modern American situation.
Even the closest to a democracy in the Warhammer world, where if you pop down to say Marienburg, which has a democracy, sort of. But it's more of a merchant state that is ruled by merchant bloodlines, and it doesn't really have much of a democracy.
Billionaire class in Warhammer, billionaire class in America.
The Marienburg would suit, at least where it appears the Republicans are going just now, very well. And as I'm sure you can probably tell, that wouldn't go down very well. Honestly, someone like Obama.
He would probably be more like a village elder type figure, or like someone in like kind of a smaller like conglomerate, as opposed to like he wouldn't be up there with like royal figures. He'd probably be like a very well, depending on his circumstance, he would be a well-regarded or well-hated member of like smaller communities. As far as like who he would be, who would be his enemy? Whoever he didn't agree with him. The Warhammer world is very, it's very incendiary. So like, if someone's with you, then hey, awesome, this person's my best friend. We're ride or die. And if they're not with you, clearly they're a heretic and they are the enemy and they should die.
The mistake a lot of people make when they read about, say, for example, places like the Empire is they go, okay, these are the good guys. And you know what? They kind of are, but they are still, as far as modern government is concerned, so exceedingly authoritarian and dictatorial in a fashion that we as modern folks, if we had that in real life, we'd be like, this is unacceptable. This is awful. This is terrible. They are not democratic institutions by any stretch at all, but super fun.
Maybe he'd be a border prince. Who knows?
That'd do. Do you want to go this time?
Yes. Communism Incorporated. Hilarious name. How do you think Storm Fiends could be implemented in Warhammer 3? I personally like them to have 3 miles per unit, like Eltharian's Knights of Tor Gaval. So, ideally, in my opinion, the way you would probably... So, the trick with Storm Fiends is that in tabletop, one of the things that made them stupidly powerful is there are 6 variants of them. And when you would take a unit, you could just design them how you wanted. So you could have, like, each one of them could have a completely different kit of weapons. That's not going to work in a video game like Total War. It would be a complete fucking mess. More than likely what they would need to do, in my opinion, is probably do a melee variant and a range variant, where the melee variant has a mixture of the different weapons, but they all fundamentally kind of do the same thing. And then the range version is similar, where like they shoot different kinds of weapons, And if I was Creative Assembly, I'd probably kind of cheat and make it not like the tabletop minis, where the tabletop minis were like one would have shock gauntlets and he would have a pair of shock gauntlets. I would be like, okay, put a shock gauntlet on one of his arms and then do the Doom Flare blade thing on his other arm. So we're kind of combining as much as possible, so I don't have to make a shitload of variants. My goal would be to minimize effort to the best of my ability. That being said, it would also depend on like the scale of the DLC they came in. If someone came to me and they were like, hey, we're doing an End Times Skaven DLC, so all you've got to worry about are like the Vermin Lords, Thankful, and the Storm Fiends, well, then I might include more Storm Fiend variants because I'm trying to fill more slots. So for me, it would depend on how many slots is CA trying to fill, and like what's the maximum amount of slots they can give to Storm Fiends, and then you go from there.
Sounds good to me. Delta, thank you very much. I know you have your fast method of statting characters for roleplay, but how would you stat someone with near god levels like, here we go. There's all manner of fun god level characters in Warhammer, let's be honest, but I'm just going to dive in straight away and say, don't.
Yep, don't. They just...
now, you can. Yeah. If you want to sit down and figure it all out and do so, you can, but don't. Because you'll run into the problem that the current publishers of the game have. If we're taking like someone like, I don't know, the Moon Empress, for example, if we put basic simple stats on that, it's just not going to reflect what she is at all. I would suggest that they are more narrative events where they can do broadly whatever they need to do in a situation, and your average PC can't do anything about it. Sure, if you want to do some rolls, you can, but they're only going to fail on the most unlikely of results. There's almost no need for stats for god tier characters. Having said that, though, yes, they can be built, and yes, you can slowly but surely stretch the system. So, for example, characters like Karl Franz, the Countess of Nuln, they can all be statted relatively well within the model. But something that is like right at the very top, the Dragon Emperor, or as you mentioned, or, you know, Nagash, these are things that don't work very well with stats, and they're actually better handled as narrative events, which means that you are using them as a storytelling tool rather than using them as a bunch of numbers to throw at someone. Can Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay 4th edition handle them? Yes, but the numbers are so big that it's almost not worth doing.
Yeah, what I would kind of add in is the only reason I could imagine where you'd ever really need to stat them is if you're like gonna fight them. And if you're fighting an entity like this, then it quite literally comes down to like, think of like the last season of the first Castlevania show where they fight like death, of like his stats are infinite. There's no way to kill him except there's a MacGuffin. So your characters, your PCs would need to have a MacGuffin because they're going up against an infinite stat line character, essentially.
And that's why it's a narrative event. You deal with it narratively. You don't deal with it by hitting them with, you know, a +2 critical or something like that. You're going to need to deal with it as part of the overall story. Sir Pan, sorry, you have something there?
Lindsay. Marienburg is interesting, as you can see the current system developing into a more free town councilor type election than developing into a true representative democracy over time. Yes, and then I can't wait for when they start unleashing their Skyrock drone strikes across other parts of the Warhammer world.
Sir Panza, Frick, because apparently we don't fuck around here. Marry or kill Marathi, Morgiana, and Miao Yang. With Lindsay watching, she's literally saying, if you kill Marathi, I'm after you, because she rather likes Marathi. Man, this is actually, you know, the obvious one is you should kill Marathi. I mean, you should.
Yeah, I would definitely kill Marathi, fuck Morgiana Le Fay, and marry Miao Ying. That's mine. That's mine.
It's the obvious one, isn't it? Which version of Morgiana do we go with?
Doesn't matter to me. That changes absolutely nothing. I would say it has to be Elf one because that's the right one, and anyone who says otherwise is a liar.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, the right thing to do is exactly what Sotek said, but there's a large part of me that wants to keep Marathi going. It's an even larger part of me now. Yes, I am going for exactly what Sotek said because I'm not an idiot. That is the correct option, but holy crap, that's not fair. Hammond, pick one hero and villain to teleport to the MCU. Malekith, the Dark Elf King.
Yeah, so we could get a better movie that has a Malekith in it.
That'll do. Christopher Eccleston was.
Well, yeah, I know. What a waste. What a waste.
Yeah, what a waste.
I would probably do Nagash and you know what? I would love I think Krokgar would be like baller. People would love Krokgar.
I'd just like to see Guilt without the Winds of Magic getting crushed by everyone. It'd be great. No Winds of Magic, you screwed, mate. What a shame. Bong. Yep, that'll do for me. That'll be both my picks at once. The dude's dead. What a shame. Sprite Apple. How much infighting is there between the current members and the Council of 13? Sorry. I can't finish that without laughing. Okay, no, I'm back in control. Are they all constantly at war with each other?
Yeah. Yes, they are.
So, how is the Council held without all members killing each other very carefully and with the awareness that the Horned Rat is there laughing at everything that they do? Yeah.
Yeah, they are. I'll put it this way. There's a quote I love about the Council of 13 that says something along the lines of that there was an assassination attempt on one of the members, and it was very heavily frowned on by all 12 members, not because they didn't want him assassinated, but because they felt that the assassination attempt was so like bland and boring and like overdone that everyone was very displeased with the lack of originality. Like it was very funny. They are constantly trying to fucking kill each other. Constantly.
They are, and they're constantly in a position where it's an open attack would fail and likely get the person killed because they'd all react to it. So it's all about keeping yourself alive. And often the best way to keep yourself alive is not to attack or be the focus of attention, which means that they're constantly wheeling and dealing in lots of different ways to move attention to others for their failures. Ultimately, often it will be, who can we make look smallest because they're the one that's most likely to fall off or get attacked by the Horned Rat himself, hopefully. Please, come on, Horned Rat, kill him because I hate him. They are super paranoid though, so they have all of their defenses in place, everything prepared. It's a fun thing.
And there's a lot of,
I like it.
One of them will try to kill the other, but then 3 others will foil that attempt just out of spite for the one that's trying to kill him in the first place.
And so, like, because they think it might be an attempt to kill them, a feint.
Yeah, it is. Yeah. They have the most convoluted, goofy, over-the-top mess of a political system, which is what makes them so fun.
Agreed.
Thanks to Andy thank you, Sir Panza. Thanks to Andy every time I see Reed Balthazar get a little voice in my head says fuck that guy.
Because seriously, fuck that guy. Hutchins, wise and honorable Longbeards. I do believe he's referring to us. Ah, you fool. What is your favorite Wind of Magic and favorite lore of magic in general?
So my favorite wind is Azir. And that's just because I desperately loved Lore of Heavens growing up. And it has a lot of really fond memories for me of like throwing comets at people and having a good time and yada yada. My favorite lore of magic, somewhat controversial take, just because it's today and this could very easily change depending on the day. My favorite lore of magic is one that is unfortunately not really treated like a lore of magic, which for me is geomancy. I love Slaane's geomancy, nice. Especially if you go back to like 5th edition Lizardman, where Mazdamondi had his own spell list that was just all geomancy spells. It is so fucking cool, and it's so devastatingly powerful. I actually remember when the 8th edition Lizardman book came out, the Lizardman fans were really butthurt. Me being one of them, because the leak came out that we were getting a lore of magic for the Slaane, and we all got insanely excited thinking we were finally getting geomancy.
Geomantic web.
And then it just turned out to be high magic. We were
high
like,
magic.
okay, but
Yeah, it was bullshit. That's what that was. I remember when it came out and I felt exactly the same. So on my side, I've written so much about all of them, and I tend to find that the one that's my favorite is the one that I most recently was writing about, or am writing about, because that's the one that's taken up all my imagination. I'm trying to think of different ways it can manifest. Overall, the one that I've enjoyed writing about most has generally been Heish, because it's so poorly written by many. And nobody quite grasps what it is, and I really like getting my teeth into it. But that's mostly been from my own personal projects. My overall lore of Magic that I like most, that's a toughie. It's a toughie, because they keep on breaking up lores in ways I don't like. For example, taking, say, a lore of necromancy, turning it into sub-lores, different types of necromancy. And when Warhammer Fantasy Battle splits it up, then the fantasy roleplay game often says it's a completely different type of magic. And you're like, no, necromancy is just big, man. It's just big. It's got a lot of spells. I at the moment I'm kind of digging the lore of necromancy, but again for personal reasons.
That one actually always makes me laugh, because I think the battle game usually does a really good job in the description of the lore of explaining this isn't a unique lore of Magic. It's just like that wizard's interpretation of it, like Heinrich Kemmler's Lore of the Barrows from the White Dwarf articles, or the lore of vampires versus like the lore of undeath from the end times. It wasn't a new lore, really. It was like, oh no, this is Nagash's perfected version of necromancy, as opposed to the standard version that all modern necromancers are using. And it's like, oh, okay. Then some people are like, oh, it's totally new. And it's like, no, it's really not.
Agreed completely. Ellie the Grey comes in and says, I've seen that the Tome of Salvation mentions that Renald is a patron to early democratic movements in the Empire. Is there any more info on these movements or on similar movements globally? No. I mean, we can, they're mentioned here and there that there's one group or another group, but really, no. The most that there is pretty much in the Tome of Salvation. If I go through what 3rd edition adds, it didn't really add anything. A 4th edition doesn't really go down that route either. So broadly, not yet, but somebody might pick it up. But the idea of democracy in a time when decisive decisions are often required, democracy by its nature takes time. It is a slower process. So you'll often find that democracy was seen by many who have to deal with the realities of greenskins and chaos and all various awfulness. They'll just laugh at it, particularly because their own traditions that are often divinely inspired are much more regnal. An idea of having individuals who make all of the decisions swiftly for all of the potential good and all of the disasters that that can bring. Democracy is clearly a better option in the greater scheme of things, but the way that they've... the answer is loosely no.
I would say if you were going to explore that, I would love to see that explored as part of like the Riemann Empire storyline, where like there was a great democracy that existed in the world, and it ran into problems because of the nature of the Warhammer world and like how they tried to deal with it and stuff. And then obviously the Riemann Empire falls, and there would be something that kind of relates a little too closely to modern day world of how modern Talea kind of pretends that it's democracy, but you have to have money to play in the game. Which is horribly relatable to modern politics, at least in the American side of things. So I think there's a story you could tell there about how there have been great democracies and what their struggles and successes and stuff have been.
I seem to remember that in the Tome of Salvation I wrote, actually, let me just pull up my file on it, because I still have the original files when I wrote it. I seem to remember that I wrote a little bit near the beginning about Renald's view on what leadership and removing power is, and it's right in the very beginning in the Riddles 10. The perfect crime, and the perfect crime is politics, basically. I say, for if we succeed, we cannot be caught, even if all know of our deeds. Only if we fail can we be punished. But how can this be? When we commit a crime, the law of the land always follows, especially if they know what we have done and who we are. Not for this crime, my friend. I can guarantee that success will bring us safety. Please do not taunt me so. What is the crime we must plan? You tell me is the answer, and the crime is bringing down the kingdom. Because if you bring down the kingdom and you replace it, then you do not get punished for your crime. It is the perfect crime. And the perfect crime in that case is revolt. Is revolt against those who stand above us and rule us, perhaps without any right to do so. So if you want to have an early democratic movement, I wrote it directly into page 19 of the Tome of Salvation. So there's a little quotation for you. Making my own post-apocalyptic TTRPG. Tips. Okay. Make a plan. Decide what you want it to say. What are the core themes and motifs of your game? Apocalyptic stuff is generally what caused the apocalypse and what are they now? Is it going to be the classic post-apocalyptics? Oh, we're all grubbing away. It's a survival type game. Or is there various groups that have risen up? Decide what it's all about. Decide your core themes and motifs. Make a plan and then stick to it and do not overwrite. The biggest mistake people make when they make their own games is that they go, I'm going to write a game. They just start writing. And they end up writing tons and tons of shit. Some of it might be brilliant, but it's more than they need because they're just writing a game. And they might have, a 200-page rulebook they plan, and it ends up being 450 pages, an absolute bloat fest that's full of stuff that nobody really needs and just isn't that great as a book. So make a plan, stick to it. That's my tip.
So just because I know you're here, Sage, and Lindsay is also likely still here, if you want to do the perfect crime by their standards, it's apparently to have a checklist of grossly pissing off every religious leader in the old world.
Yep. Fair. The Blue Person. Thank you very much, Blue Person. The Cult of Arena is the main place to send youths to learn. But would the Cult of Handrich be a good alternative, at least for maths and economics? Okay, so for those of you who don't know, Handrich is the god of merchants and basically is the capitalist god. And first thing first, if this was the case and we were running it as the proper, almost satire of capitalism, you're going to come out of that school with debt. Heavy debt. You're going to owe the cult for the rest of your life. So would it be a good place to learn? Oh yes, especially because they would be seeking to ensure that everybody who was taught by them were very good at earning money because they get their investment back. So you'd get a pretty good education, but it would be very focused only on the things that would be likely to both benefit the cult of Handrich and ensure that you made money. And that arguably is good, where Verena is much more about wisdom and justice and doing the right thing. They don't care about doing the right thing. They care about making money.
Those would be two universities that would hate each other.
They are very different. And they're not the only places that you could go, Bloat Person. For example, if you're in Altdorf, there's a very large center of education there that everybody forgets. It's huge. It educates tons of the orphans in the city, the Light College. They are constantly dragging people in, giving them an education, throwing them into their choirs. They're constantly drawing the Heich, and then if they've got any magical potential, pulling them in through the college. If they don't, turfing them out again. One of the big mistakes of Altdorf is thinking that it's not literate. I would argue since the founding of the Colleges of Magic, the incidence of literacy in Altdorf is so much higher than almost anywhere else in the old world. It's quite a significant difference. So you've also got the Light College as a potential source for education, which is, a slightly different way of looking at things. That guy Gorbad, being soundly defeated, retreated to the Badlands. Though he expected some sort of resistance, the haggard king of war bosses did not expect the lone Crimson figure waiting for him. Skulltaker.
Oh, yeah, that's definitely one way you could resolve that story.
That is one way you could resolve that story. I think it's actually quite a good one, that guy, because one of the biggest problems with Skulltaker is his skulls are shit.
Yeah.
the people he's killed are really not all that. And that would be a good way to resolve that story. Yeah, I quite like that one. Teo Benora, what outside sources to Warhammer could I go to for inspiration to expand on Athel Loren? I mean...
honestly, that's actually kind of a good question to ask, because oftentimes people don't think about using outside sources, which is the best thing to do in many cases. For For Athel Lauren, interestingly, in my opinion, I would really recommend looking into horror. Things like the SCP universe, I think, could have a lot of really good inspirations. Because what you want to look into, I would look into a mixture of dark forest tropes as well as Fey tropes. Because, like, especially Fey realms have thousands of real world history of years of myths about like the dangers of going out into the forest, of disturbing fairy circles, of talking to strange entities and making sure you don't tell them your name, or like all these other weird convoluted rules. Athel Lauren is very much that. It's an alien realm that people are not supposed to be in because the rules are bizarre and you're kind of expected to know them, because there's no mercy for you because you're ignorant. Not in like a mean way, but like if you stumble in there, you better be super fucking lucky or have a guide or something. But I would do a lot of research into a lot of horror tropes of that kind. And then maybe, obviously Tolkien's got some stuff you can kind of use, but Tolkien's world is very, very friendly compared to Athel Lauren.
Yeah, Athel Lauren is horrible. It's also beautiful. And I think that mixture should be done. So we're going for the horror on one side, and I think that horror is a core component of Athel Lauren, to the point that, if Sotek hadn't said it, it's where I was going to go first. Horror, number one, but also the aching beauty, even when it's beginning to decay, even when it's falling apart. All of the seasons are present, all of the spirits are present, and everything about this place just ekes natural and also working with nature beauty. So go looking through artists that are going to show scale, and your small elves running through these enormous trees, the light coming down in shafts of light. So instead of going for the literary source, go for the artistic source. Start looking for artists who are willing to show you the nature and the beauty of nature in its most majestic way. And that will, I think, probably influence how you describe working your way through Athel Lauren, because yes, it's got evil doed horror roots that are going to grab you and yank you off. That's bad. And particularly because I said yank you off. But on top of that,
I mean, there are some spirits will do that too.
There absolutely is. But on top of that, the place is extraordinary. It is a place of poets. It is a place of beauty. And yet that's worth reflecting as well. Alrighty, moving down to Marathi. See, sorry, I really didn't want to kill you earlier. I really didn't want to kill you. But it happened. I regret it already. Missed the Gorbad stream, so asking now. Would Myrmidian research his strategies like they do other races, and what would they gain from it?
So this is one of those things where I actually think you could have a very cool story of a genuine, true deep Myrmidian would say, yes, absolutely. Mm-hmm. Absolutely. But a lot of people would say no because they're inherently speciesist and would think that, like, no, obviously there's nothing we can learn from foul greenskins. Whereas the more enlightened of them, the Gorbad's greatest strength and would make what would make him worth studying in particular would be the fact that he was a master of utilizing the natural abilities of what he had at hand, which is something that it doesn't matter what species you are, you could learn from that.
Right. Who do we study when it comes to war? Those who win. And those who win because of the choices they made, not because they were overwhelmingly more powerful. Grom was the second part. He was overwhelmingly more powerful. Grom's strategies are not something worth studying. By comparison, Gorbad, with a far smaller Wa, organized his greenskins and was willing to lose significant chunks of the impetus of his Wa to reorganize it into a working army. And then he won again and again and again. There are true tactics there that are worth studying. So the answer is definitely. And there are going to be people who say there's nothing that can be learned from there. I agree completely with Sotek. But on top of that, there are going to be many, particularly Myrmidians, particularly Leoricans, if we want to look at those who are studying warfare as a actual discipline which one should learn in school, and the Leorican monks, who are one of the factions of Myrmidians, would be particularly interested in this. So yes, I do think that there would be Leorican lectures on the various tactics that were used, not just by Gorbad, but by other orcs too, because you're not just learning what we could learn from them, you're also learning how to face them and defeat them, which means you have to study all of them, including Grom. What were Grom's successes 100 years ago? Why did he succeed and why did we fail? And what was the most effective tactic? And the most effective tactic for Grom was channel him elsewhere. Get rid of him. Holy shit, yes. Brock 6000, the glorious Reichland map. Got me into Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay. I'm so glad to hear that, because I did the glorious Reichland map. I love it. What is the deal with Farbrandt's tomb in the Haggard Cribs? Or what are the plot hooks for it? Did we write any? I don't think I wrote any plot hooks.
No, I think he's asking, could you give some? Because I'm pretty sure there's not.
I'm pretty sure I didn't do any from it. Farbrandt's tomb came from another map, as I recall, but this is really running from my memory. Farbrandt's tomb, where did it come from? Get back to me in that. Brock 6000, I don't want, you've dropped a super chat, I don't want not to do that. So I'm going to go mark in Discord.
No, I mean, I think now. It sounds like ancient Unbergen name.
Farbrandt, that's not ancient. Farbrandt would be middle, so we're talking year 1000 approximately around there.
Granted, still, that's still 1500 years.
I mean, it's like 1500 years old. It's like proper old. Hagar Cribs. Are you Brock 6000? I don't know if you're in my 6000. Let's see if it brings you up. It doesn't, so I'm not sure if you're in my Discord.
Join the LAWhammer Discord, please.
Yes.
And there will be further discussion on that.
And I'm just going to put a post in the Lorebeards chat. In fact, I'll go open up in Lorebeards discussions, and I'll trace it down for you, because it's not one that I made up myself, and I'd like to get that one. It's on my maps though. So where is it? Where is it? Cool. So let's move on to the next one. We are moving on to Black Wolf E82. Andy, when you were working at Games Workshop, was there ever any discussion about the Sky Titans and making a better story for them than being eaten by ogres? Right, so I didn't work down in the studio because, oh, hell no. I didn't work down in the studio. I worked around the Games Workshop stores. And when I was working for them, there were no Sky Titans. Now, later, when I moved into writing lots of stuff for Black Library and for Black Industries, the Sky Titans were just being introduced. And so it was first story, so there was never any idea of, let's do a better story. It was the initial story for them. That's what they were. And then as time went by, then various writers start picking up and saying, should we do this, should we do that? But I'll be honest, the Sky Titans story was really far away from the vast majority of writers' ideas, because it's a distant subject for the vast majority of stories that are being told in the Warhammer world. So the answer to this one is, from my side, no.
That being said, I will note that a lot of people, myself included, are very excited for the new Cathay book, because Games Workshop is apparently adding Sky Titan lore, which they have not done for almost 20 years. So, woohoo!
Well, make me a happy man. Right, so pardon me, I was busy writing myself a message. Hammond, Andy, when are you releasing your Super Mega Empire map? I'm not. I have no intentions of doing that. My master map that sits behind the scenes is for me, and that's it. But I do release things from it all the time. Very recently, I released out the Middenland section of the political maps for it. It's a map that's constantly being updated, and as I also mentioned last time I talked about it, it's a map that's also, about half of it, a complete state, because of a hard drive crash and things went wrong. It got upscaled and it all went weird. So I have like literally a month of solid work to turn it into a fully functioning thing anyway. So I have no plan to release the super mega empire map of all things, but I do have many plans to release lots of bits from it over time. Moving down to Sam, do you all think Grail Knights, Guardians, etc. are represented well in tabletop and Total War?
Okay, so this is one of those things where like the lore and the battle tabletop game are never going to match. They're just not, because otherwise the game would be completely busted and it wouldn't make any fucking sense. And you'd be like, oh, well, I've read this lore story about a Grail Knight, so he should be a unit of 1 because he's just out there kicking the shit out of anything that moves. And he's like basically a greater demon. But this other story has Grail Knights that are kind of impressive, but they're not that level of impressive. So maybe that unit should have like 5 guys in it. Like it would just get super messy. So I think they're fine in a tabletop Total War sense of that they are the most elite units that those armies can run, and they're very, very good at what they do. Which I'm like, great. That's about as good as you can get for a battle game.
Agreed. Completely. I think that'll do. There's always space for individual characters that do individual things, but I think that broadly speaking, they do fine for what they are. Inquisitor Thomas, what are some of the most horrific defenses and hazards in the Tomb King cities?
Well, if you ever go check out, we talked about it earlier, but there's a Wolfrup second edition, right? Yeah, second edition supplement called Lore of the Lich Lord that you can read that has, it's literally just full of traps. And it introduced a lot of really fun things for Wolfrup that actually survive pretty well into the modern day, though they're harsh. The biggest thing in my opinion that is really gross about Tomb Kings, like the thing that I would be the most terrified of, and one of my favorite tropes about them, is that they are absolute masters of underground ambush, because they have sand everywhere, and sand is really soft, and so a lot of Tomb King defenses rely on things being burrowed beneath the sand, and you're walking across it, and you don't realize you're in danger until something quite literally reaches up, grabs you, and pulls you under, and you are drowning in sand, if not being ripped apart or eaten or whatever. But to me, that's probably one of the most horrific ways to go, because, like, I don't know, I grew up in the 90s when a lot of action movies were using quicksand like crazy, and it looked nightmarish and like a horrible way to die. So that being said, I think it would be hard to argue that Nehekhara, the Land of the Dead itself, is their most deadly defense system, where it is a awful, awful, awful desert where nothing lives. It's not like the deserts in our world. The deserts in our world are full of life. Yeah. The Land of the Dead is dead. There is nothing that lives there. Nothing. And everything that's dead there is still moving and trying to kill you.
Yes. I recommend go check out Lure of the Lich Lord. It's not particularly difficult to get. Sorry, Lure of the Lich Lord. I'm Scottish, can't help it.
Well, you know,
literally can't help myself. Yeah, it's going to give you tons of things you can read and be inspired by. So rather than us list off a bunch of them, go check out that book. It's not difficult to find if you want to go find it online. Dominic Lynch, this is the fun for the Gilead Lithane vid. Justice for my Elgie. Go Trek. If so, well, by Dark Teeth Plus good review. Sorry to Badger. Yeah, because I avoided a Gilead discussion the other day and still half think I have some things I want to say about that book. Well, in fact, there's two, isn't there? Two.
There's 2 books. Yeah.
2 books. They're running off the top of my head. 2 books. It's not high on the list of stuff for us to do, I'll admit. I mean, it's a pretty minor character in an offside set of books.
Yeah, well, the thing about Gilead that makes me like hesitant to dedicate any serious time to discussing it is that it's such a specific niche that I would argue much of it doesn't translate super well into the modern setting. Because he kind of just, like, his first book is he kind of just pops into existence and he just wanders around like a weirdo. of getting into the weirdest antics. And it's like it's great. I think it's a great duology, but it's so far down the list of things that I consider relevant to understanding the setting that it's not even funny.
Yeah, I'm kind of the same. There's bits of it. You see, I have a bee in my bonnet, and I do have things I want to say about it because bits of it I'm just not a fan of. As I recall, was it Nick Vincent that did that, and it had Dan Abnett's name attached to it?
I believe that's correct.
I think I haven't read it for ages, but I remember when I first read it, going, So it's pretty low down on the list, even though I would very much and very
you are correct
to buy Dark Deeds.
Dan Vincent, Nick Vincent and Dan Abnett. Yeah.
I'm pretty sure it was written by Nick Vincent. I might be wrong in that. I'm pretty sure he wrote it, and Dan Abnett's name was attached for whatever reasons, because Dan Abnett. Suddenly the book sells tons. I might be wrong about that. That's off the top of my head from ages ago. But yeah, I can't see that there's any reason for us to dive into this one unless you've got a strong reason why you would like to see us cover it.
If you've got a specific question about it or something that happens in it, I'd be happy to tackle it.
Yeah, that seems probably a better way, but it was a while back. Theme team, thanks for the stream. Not a problem. Would it make lore sense for the Horned Rat and Be'lakor to temporarily cooperate to help bring about the end times? First, does Be'lakor want the end times? That's an interesting question. Probably. Does the Horned Rat want the end times? Probably not. No. So I think the answer to this is, if we go with our classic motivations, Be'lakor's in it for himself, and the end times is a result that it might want if it regained its previous position as a god, but it was very much a material god sitting in the material realm. So the end times might be actually against what Be'lakor would prefer as an outcome, as a classic chaos god against chaos, the old Malal slot that was taken all the way back in Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay First Edition. Oh, except they discarded that for copyright reasons. So that then leaves us with the Horned Rat, who almost certainly doesn't want it. So I think the answer to this is no, but I definitely could see both sides using the other side and potentially them having shared goals, which allows what appears to be an alliance to occur, but it's not really an alliance.
Yeah, it would. I could absolutely see these forces working together, just trying to manipulate one another into a situation where they could then backstab them and take advantage to put themselves on top. And it makes the whole thing even more clusterfucky because they'd both be aware that they're going to the other's going to try and betray them. So they're trying to like put defenses in play for that. So it's a perfect thing to throw PCs into. So yeah, I would say generally yes, but I agree with Andy. I don't think their ultimate goal would be the end times. It would probably be more like leading towards an end time scenario that they then try to subvert to pivot all of that potential and power into themselves.
Yep, seems fair. Yep. Madman12222. I've just done reading Shaman Slayer. Nice.
Great
and
book.
It made me realize how truly terrifying the beastmen are when unified behind a powerful shaman. What are y'all's favorite book moment with the beastmen?
I have a bit of an unusual one. So my favorite beastman story is from it's from the Tome of Corruption, I believe. There's a small story about the Minotaurs that has like a Minotaur POV, and it's so a lot of people don't know this, but Minotaurs are often placed as guardians of chaos, like relics or chaos stones. So there will be like an obelisk or a monolith or something where beastmen will come and leave offerings to the dark gods, and a Minotaur will guard it or protect it. And there's a story about a little kid gets lost in the forest and finds their way to one of these monolith chaos things where they encounter a Minotaur. And the Minotaur doesn't kill the kid. Instead, the Minotaur deliberately keeps them alive and sets them on the path to get home safely. But the Minotaur talks to them and basically says, I didn't kill you because you're too weak and you're not a challenge. Go, grow up, become strong, and then come back. And then I'll face you. And I love that story because it adds such a fascinating layer of complexity to what you would expect to happen encountering. Because a lot of the times with the beastmen, they're treated as just like big dumb animals. But when you consider the stories about like how they take in individual crying babies, or they like Beastmen often, in a really weird way, are surprisingly merciful towards children, which is super cool and super interesting, and a lot of people don't really think about that a lot of the time.
This one's tough for me. I'm going through the army lists. I'm going through the bits. So I'm going to choose something completely different. I'm going to go instead over to Vermintide. And yeah, I know, left field. But I remember I was having a conversation with Games Workshop at the time about Beastmen and how we could use them. And at that point, the Beastmen were very much the Beastmen army list. And I was told, Beastmen army list. And I said, But Beastmen are much more than what the army list offers. There are, for example, the many stories of kids who are left out, mutants, that have been born in the villages and then given over to the Beastmen tribes that are out there, given over to the forest for whatever local reasons, because they don't want to kill their own kid just because he's been born a little bit different. And there's really some nice stories there, and they are humans that are getting raised, and many of them become beastmen as well. Many of them actually effectively are beastmen to be. There's lots of extra nuance here I'd like to use, and it's the roleplay game. The roleplay game often has it. And they said, we'd prefer you to stick to the army list. Then the very next day, Vermintide released their advert where they had a human who was left out in the forests, came back as a full beastman and slaughtered all the village as one of their adverts for their upcoming releases. And I literally sent an email the next day saying, I'm really glad that this has just been released because I think there might be some nuance here that I could visit. And the reply was, yeah, fair enough. So that was a nice little story about how things, I mean, often when you're writing for Games Workshop, you are writing within very clear channels that they have created from their studio. But when you're dealing with the broader world, the studio often hints that the world is much bigger. And on the fantasy roleplay side, we often very much examined the ramifications of the bigger part of the world. But sometimes they say, we'd rather you didn't, just stick to the stuff. And that's what you do, because you're working for them, really. It's their stuff. It can be whatever they want it to be. But obviously, as someone who's a big fan of the lore, you want to examine the stuff that they have already put in print themselves. So when that happened with Vermintide, I was a pretty happy man. So yeah. Humans taste like haggis, says Hammond.
The only other thing I'll add in with the Beastman thing is if you haven't read it, go read the Bretonian Omnibus. The story of Callard, I think. The first book has a genuinely amazing Beastman antagonist. Like it is the most sympathetic, heartbreaking Beastman story. It is very good.
Just want to bring up this comment because it sort of makes me laugh.
Yeah, that's what I'm aspiring to be. So yeah.
I mean, I wasn't. It was a cooperative relationship because that's the best way to do it. Because you're always working with them rather. You never want to be someone who's nagging or against them. But sometimes it is worth pointing out that their lore is bigger than they might first realize.
Man, it does feel like a thin line, though, doesn't it? Between
it does. It's very difficult to walk that line, and you can only walk that line if you are trusted. If you are not trusted, it's a very difficult line to walk where you'll just be slapped down and told, no, you don't do it that way.
And this is why, folks, when we ask y'all to leave reviews for either Cubicle 7 or Creative Assembly stuff, we always say, be nice. Be nice. Because if you're not nice, they're just going to fucking ignore you.
Yeah, and they'd be right to ignore you too. During the anime, then, the best way to become Devonger. So a dwarf friend.
Okay, so this one I think is actually kind of funny because I think okay, so this one your mileage will vary on GM because there is not a very, to put it bluntly, there's not a very good system in place to determine like, oh, you filled the Devonger meter, good job, here's your achievement. It's because I would say so I'll give you an example. I have a campaign right now where if you play the enemy within in book 2, there is a scenario you will come across where if your PCs are following the main story, you are most likely going to help out a group of dwarfs with a mine problem and some other stuff. And that situation can, depending on how your party handles it and how easy you make it on the dwarfs and what all you give them, could result, if your GM is feeling particularly generous like ours was, for like if I was a GM, that particular scenario I do not think would be equal to becoming Devonger. It would be these dwarves like you very much, but not Devonger. But my GM at the time, when another one of the PCs, dwarf was like, "Hey, you guys are awesome. Thanks for doing all the stuff for us. Like, I really appreciate it. Is there something we can do to settle the debt between us?" And one of our PCs was like, "Hey, can you make us Devonger?" And our GM was like, "Sure."
Well, asking to become Devonger would be the first route to not becoming Devonger in my book.
Yeah, so it's a lot of your whoever your GM is will buy. And granted, in our campaign, it hasn't been that important of a story beat.
So I agree with all of that. It's down to your GM. And down to what works best there. If we're looking at the story beats and the enemy within, the printed version rather than the crazed version that we're running over in LAWhammer, then your best chance is in the Horned Rat, by far. And that is only going to come about if, and this is where I'm now going to say spoilers. I don't like spoiling campaigns, so I'm going to take a little bit of time for those of you who don't want to be spoiled to go, "Okay, Andy, how big's the spoiler?" It's only going to be about 2 sentences, but it's a fucking spoiler. So be aware of that, because I'm about to say it. There's a possibility of retaking a lost hold. That's big stuff. That's proper big, and it has to be big to be named Devonger, which means that you are trustworthy to all dwarfs, which means you have to be. And if you're not, the dwarfs that name you that are going to probably be taking Slayer oaths or worse for getting it so massively wrong. But if you do the big deed, then yes, you might very well get the big reward. But again, even that is difficult because you would have to be personally responsible for making it happen.
Yeah, it couldn't just be like, "Oh, you help them get started." It would be like your PCs are like, "No, we're gonna put a hold on the enemy within storyline, and we're gonna go on this huge fucking side quest to help these dwarfs with this hold in the Middle Mountains storyline, and succeed."
Yeah,
like it couldn't even be that they attempted. You would have to succeed.
I would take a wee look through, for example, the Felix and Gotrek books, because Felix becomes Devonger, obviously. And there's a nice little bit, I can't remember which book it was called, in where it's called out, and there's like he's a dwarf friend, and Felix doesn't even know what that means, because why would he?
Yeah. Gotrek's just like, "No, he's dwarf friend." And Felix
and they were like, "Yeah, of course he is, because he did this and he did this and he did this. Oh yeah, he's a dwarf friend. That's from the dwarves." And it means something. It's big. So the best way to become Devonger in the campaign is to do something that ensures that every dwarf thinks you are honourable and will always be honourable towards them and their concerns. And that is not a small thing.
Yeah, I think.
Okay.
I think Felix. Yeah, I think if I recall correctly, I think Felix earns it after Demon Slayer, especially when he picked up the Hammer of Fate and actually managed to use it.
I think it's before Demon Slayer. I think he has it by Demon Slayer already, but I might be wrong. I haven't read it for about 5 years, so
yeah,
don't quote me on that. Anyway, Dino Man's huge comment. Dino Man, you really need to cut your comments in two. So, as I try to peer over this one, so the answer to this question is probably we don't know, so I'm more interested in your opinion. When a soul goes to the Aether, does it remain distinct, or does it just become etheric energy? Also, are souls etheric energy drawn from the Aether, or are they like etheric energy somehow generated outside the Aether? The crux of my question is basically, are souls actually recycled energy from what used to be other souls, at least in part? And yes, I'm getting rid of that comment because it was too huge.
You're right. I don't know.
Okay, so there is some answers for this, but as I'm going to discuss when we do this as a focus topic next Wednesday, there are many contradicting versions of this. So the answer is uncertain. So the next question is, what's the views? And the views, I don't really want to spoil much of what I'm going to discuss next week, but I will say that everything that you write there could be the case. Everything.
Yes.
Very much could be the case. And if you want it to be that, you would be well within your rights to make it exactly what you've described. Because there are examples of that in more than one source that describe it pretty much like that. But I will also say there are many examples, particularly when we start delving into the specifics of necromancy rather than the broad examples that are provided in books like, say, the Liber Necris. When we start getting to the specifics that go, oh, wait a minute, everything the Liber Necris says is just wrong. Absolutely wrong. The core text is broken. So the answer to this one, from my perspective, will be it's actually going to have to be up to you, because there are multiple readings that can be made from the text we have.
I would just fully agree with that. And we'll talk a lot more about it next week.
But a lot more about that one next week. Inquisitor Thomas, my favorite Grand Theogenist, is Eltharion.
It was a weird year that year.
I have no idea what you're referencing. What is it? I need to know.
I think he's making a play on they take dwarf names, and one of them for some reason took the name Altharion, which is not a dwarf name. He took an elf name on accident.
Amadeus Arkham. Ah, yes, I remember reading Empire in Ruins, the famous moment when the red-crested skink appears, contest the imperial wedding, and steal the bride.
It is the highlight of the entire storyline. Yeah,
it might have made it a better book.
Wow.
That came out a lot more bitchy than I intended it to. I realized what I said as I said that. I was like, oh dear, let's just move on swiftly to,
funny.
Oh no, I can't see anything. Kurenshima, what is this? So I've watched the Gorbad stream, brilliant, and got to the point where he struggled to open Aldorf's gate, and I'm curious. This is a fantasy setting with destructive magic. Why sieges, walls become a problem for most battles. Those sieges became much more mundane, like real world, instead of how they should be. Can't they just tear the walls down with magic, especially in the Empire, prior to colleges magic being established or studied? Greenskin magic would be almost unopposed, and you know what, Kurenshima, you're right. You're also wrong.
Yeah,
but you're right.
Yeah, yes, it's both. Because you are correct that the world has offensive magic, but it also has defensive magic. And the walls of Altdorf, especially. So, I'll say the guy that wrote Gorbad's story, I would be willing to bet you $1 billion did not think about the fact the colleges of magic didn't exist yet.
Yeah.
And also did not think about the fact that Altdorf wasn't what Altdorf would later become, and was working with modern Altdorf. So in his head, there were colleges of magic, and the walls of Altdorf were massive and have defensive runes in them. Like dwarfs
they
were
don't.
No, well, they should. But like there are a lot of magical defenses. There are things you could do in Warhammer to make your defenses resistant against magic. Whether it's you hire some dwarves or priests bless the living shit out of it, or you build it out of particular materials. There are ways to counteract, like a really good example. If you go read Gotrek and Felix Zombie Slayer, one of the whole major story beats of that book is how the Castle Reichsguard, I think.
Is it the Reichfang Fortress? I'm trying to remember the one. It was Castle Reichgard when they moved through there. Yes.
Yeah. So Castle Reichgard has a ridiculous amount of anti-magic defenses within its walls. And one of the big points of that book is how the necromancer, who I won't spoil, is trying to deal with the anti-magic properties of the walls.
Yeah. So I'm going to call you out for why you're right. Altdorf during this period has been written in more than one location as being a small city. Smaller than Talapine, smaller than Middenheim, and smaller than Nuln. Because historically, it wasn't that big, and it's very recently that it massively swelled in size. Reichdorf was a small town, and it's inflated and got smaller at various points over its existence. But the great anti-magical walls that it almost certainly has today just didn't exist. Yes, blessed walls by Sigmar and the wee chanting priests doing their thing. But you're right. The story doesn't take into account what Altdorf was at that time and what was going against it from Gorbad. And truth be told, those walls would almost certainly have come down if they had anything approximating a few decent shamans with them, which clearly they would have. It's a weird setup, and it needs a new telling of the story, that's all. It's not wrong. It just needs to be finessed. It needs a little bit of finessing just to make it work better. If I received that text, I'd say, yeah, love the story, but, you know, wyverns don't open gates.
Yeah.
We need to reconfigure our Battle of Altdorf because you've not done it well. The core here is Gorbad needs to be rebuffed. So let's give a good reason for why he is, rather than Gorbad relying on wyverns to open the gates. This is silly. And it just needs to be rejigged. That's all. Should be super easy. Okay, Dynaman, if Antok was resettled, which would be fun, which seems to have been debated in lore, do you think that Sundberg and El Kalabad had wars, over control of the city? Probably. Because it's Warhammer. It's not Peacehammer. Almost certainly, yes. Tyrant, Obama would be a champion of Zinch. Hope and change. See? Yeah, it's hard to argue with that one, but then most politicians would be because they're all seeking change, aren't they? That's pretty much ultimately at heart what they're up to. Ricky Chapman, quick question. What do you all think is the hardest thing to tame and use as a mount? Jabberslide. I'm only bringing that one up because people keep on asking about frickin' Jabberslide. You can't tame a Jabberslide and ride it. Get out of it, you go mad. But, you know, Meow-ying.
Yeah, I would. You know,
the Dragon Emperor.
Yeah, I would say the. So okay, I'm going to give your question a fair shake and assume you meant something that has successfully been used as a mount. What is the most difficult of those to get?
Manticore.
Yeah. I would probably go with a Chaos Dragon.
Oh yeah, that beats my Manticore.
They tend to be fairly spicy.
Yeah, Chaos Dragon, though, you can reason with, even though they've got chaos to their heart. Where Manticores just fucking suck. They're horrible creatures.
True.
Truly awful. But I think Chaos Dragon might pip it. It'd certainly be more dangerous.
Yeah,
the important word here is tame. Chaos Dragon. Yeah, it wins.
Yeah, because most Chaos Dragons, it's like a very carefully worded pack that if you fuck up, it's going to eat you.
Dimitar comes in and says, what exactly are the border princes? City-states, or are they a united state with autonomous regions like the Empire? Also love you guys. This one's really easy. They're whatever the writer decides they are that month. And it's really bloody annoying. Are there city-states? In some versions, yes. And sometimes those city-states are ancient. Take, for example, Kypros. There's also been some real-world copy-pasting. In some versions of the Border Princes, we have places like Brashov, which is Romanian Brashov. It's literally a copy-paste. In fact, many of the names were just copy-paste from the Balkans and dropped down into Warhammer. It was not a good map that day. That was all the way back at Warhammer 1st edition. In truth, it's an area that is, as far as Games Workshop's concerned, in a state of constant small c chaos, with individual warlords rising up, taking control over settlements, and then maybe keeping them for a generation or two, and then losing them. It is not an autonomous region like the Empire. It is, if anything, a large fractious space through which multiple invasions gather pace and are sometimes put down. And it's, I think, sadly lacking because of that. I think it would be a far better place if it did have islands of consistency. Islands that could give the place character.
It's been a little too heavily memeified.
It has.
Yeah. Okay, I want to grab this because it didn't show up with his super chat, but this was his question. Is it simple for priests to overly pray for miracles?
Yes. It's actually marked directly into Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay 4. If they keep on doing the same thing, hit them with sim points. If you constantly appeal for your god for petty matters, then you will be dealt with like the petty creature that you are. Gods are different though. Each god will have their own style, their own tone, and how they appeal. How they are appealed to, pardon me, and how they respond to these appeals. But if you've got a player who spams miracles, then you are well within your right to say, yeah, sorry, not today, son. Sort it out yourself.
Yeah, the Warhammer gods are not known for being terribly patient most of the time.
Yeah, true fact. Luigi Super, I like female demonates. And KOS male, KOS male?
Keeper of Secrets.
Obvious. Keeper of Secrets male. Slanesh is temptation, obsession, and most people are attracted to male and female forms, not mixed ones. That's what makes...
Yeah, I'm going to say... So I'll say this the nice way.
First, because I'm about to say exactly the same as you.
Yeah, respectfully, massive disagree of that. There are androgynous people just in our world. They're not hard to find at all. And often people are attracted to specific traits, not an entire form. I mean, think about how many times, even when you're dealing with, I'm gonna put this.
The thing about Slanesh is that you are attracted, and you often do not want to be. In fact, most of the time, do not want to be. It is the worst, and making the worst male or female is wrong, because it isn't. That it's not a natural thing. It's not like Raya, who's all for having sex, having fun, having babies, fertility. Everything is great. She's almost the goddess of sex made manifest. She's brilliant. She's pretty much normal. This is chaos. This is wrong. It is perversion. It is broken. It is horrendous. You look at it and everything about you screams no, but your body says yes, and it just goes wrong. It's horrible.
And the thing I would say is that with demons, you are often trying to defy explanation instead of leaning into explanation. And the big thing with demons is, to be very blunt, especially Slanesh demons, it doesn't actually matter what they actually look like, because they have something that's called soporific musk or other types of glamours, where they appear to you as whatever you want. Like whatever you desire most is how they will appear. And it won't be until you are literally in their claws being torn apart that you see them for what they actually are. And yet you're still attracted to them, which is an even more horrible realization.
What a way to go. It's awful.
Like Slanesh should not be the, oh, I'm genuinely attracted to that because I think that's sexy. It should be the, why am I attracted to this? This is horrible situation. So that's the distinction there.
Let's Lord Curse. What Warhammer Fantasy battle character would make the best Blood Bowl coach? I would suggest Gorbad.
I think Gorbad would actually be a very good coach. I'm kind of, he's one of those, I mean, the only character I can think of at the top of my head that's canonically in both settings as a coach, or in both settings and as a coach, is Grombrindle, who is a very good coach, apparently. But I mean, I think any of your strategic-minded characters would make excellent coaches, which there are a lot of. Especially with unusual kind of asshole strategies. Like Skarsnik, I think, would be a very good Blood Bowl coach who would cheat horribly all the time. But Goblin Blood Bowl teams are all about cheating. So
Oberwald is a place in the Empire. So I reckon the Duke of Oberwald is probably called Griff. He'll do just fine. So that's what I'm going with. Black Wolf E2. This cheer maybe got lost. It was right before the big announcement. Andy, when you were working at Games Workshop, was there any discussion about Sky? No, it didn't get lost.
No, we talked about this.
Yeah, we did do it. It's just we had a lot of other comments coming in as well. So we did indeed catch it. Thanks very much for the comment, Black Wolf. Biofoot.
Which the TLDR was no.
No. What are your favourite bits of Trench Crusade, Andy? What are you looking forward to seeing develop? Sotek, any opinions?
So I can give an opinion of, it's not my thing. I like fantasy. I really don't like tropes that pull from like modern tech or even very futuristic tech, unless it starts to lean back, like getting so futuristic it starts leaning back into fantasy, which happens a lot. But like, you know, it's very World War I coded, and I just find that boring. I just don't care. So for me, I hope it's a successful setting, because I really, really like whenever there's an opportunity for Games Workshop to be challenged by another mini thing, because if there was more competition, then GW would probably become more consumer friendly, which they are not right now. So they need more competition. So I hope it's very successful, but I have zero interest in it whatsoever.
I know quite a few people involved with this. We had Mike on Inside the Rookery not that long ago, actually, and he's the chap who's pretty much created it from scratch. It's his art, it's his ideas, which has been picked up by Thomas, and one of my bestest chums, Mark Gibbons, is doing art for it too. But I'm actually in a similar position to Sotek. It's not my cup of tea, and it's not because the ideas of it are not my cup of tea. I mean, I love World War I stuff. Unlike Sotek, I love sci-fi stuff. I love all those stuff. I just don't have extra time in my life for all the extras it offers. What I do like seeing, which again is just a repetition of what Sotek said, but it is 100% the truth, is having something there that Games Workshop is going to have to look at and say, is this a danger? Do we have to up our game? And how can we up our game? Anything that makes Games Workshop work better and hopefully smarter is a good thing to me. I don't think it's anywhere near that yet. It's got a very successful Kickstarter, and they have a lot of work ahead of them to consolidate that Kickstarter into something that is real. And that is what I'm looking forward to seeing develop, because they have all of the potential talent there. Recently, Andy Chambers signed up. They've got all the artists signing up. They've got all the writers signing up. It's potentially going to be something very special. And for me, 40K it no longer interests me in a way that it used to when I was younger. It's lost a lot of the appeal for me that it once had. Something like Trench Crusade could have filled that gap, but it's not really. I'm just looking at literally over here on my side of the computer. It's not really my thing. For all the people involved with it are the best, and I know many of them. The recent map that was released, it's great, and I know the person who made that map. He's absolutely amazing. We've had him in Inside the Rookery as well, but somewhat similarly, not really my thing. So I'm not really looking forward to anything other than the potential challenge that it offers Games Workshop, because I would like to see that happen.
I just wanted to grab this one because it's from an earlier bit. Someone, Dark Elf culture is competitive and ruthless, but would Dark Elves ever risk themselves to safeguard wavestones of other Dark Elves, even rivals? I think yes, generally, because there is political, even if they were the most selfish, dickish, completely not caring about other Dark Elves, which not all Dark Elves are like that. A lot of Dark Elves do have strong ties among their kind, even if they fucking hate each other sometimes. Mm-hmm. There is significant advantages to be had to having the soul of another elf. Huge advantages. So I don't think there's ever a situation where they would not want this.
Yeah, I think that, there's lots of story potential in that. Danny Man, you have yet again done it, haven't you? Look. You need to make your comments a bit more concise. I think it's been said before that Clan Pestilence has control over most of the Southlands. Is this likely to be a direct control, or more like a patchwork of Thrall and Warlord clans aligned with Pestilence? Also, does Pestilence have an actual known base in the Southlands? If not, I think the ruins of Carrick Zorn would be cool.
Do they control most of the Southlands? We don't really know. How do they control it? The answer is definitely no. Do they control it themselves, or with a lot of helpful clans? A lot of helpful clans. That's how Skaven work.
Clan Pestilence is not one clan, as we've discussed, and it's been pretty clearly laid out in multiple places. But how it works down there, the gods alone know, because Games Workshop are afraid of the Southlands, not just because of all the potential difficulties they might have creating something cool for it, but because they would then have to create a billion more minis. And they only have so many minis they can produce in a year. So it's a whole big open area that they've yet to touch, but the most likely place we'll see it touch first is probably Total War, if it was ever to occur.
Yeah, and the answer to literally all your questions is we don't know, because it's never been explored.
Captain Magma, funny how the Under Empire is among the most democratic societies.
In a very, rat race eating each other way, yeah, I guess.
I mean, is it? I mean,
democracy
really?
with violence, I guess.
Agger89, hey guys, is Gromrill natural to the Warhammer world or only from the destroyed polar gate? Side note for a mental exercise, adapting Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay 4E rules to run more time.
So, my opinion, which this is an opinion, to make it perfectly clear, is that all Gromrill came from Old One Tech, period. Because it is a meteoric metal. It all came from the skies. There are certain forms of really powerful, awesome metals that come from the Warhammer world naturally, like LAWhammer, which is really cool. But Gromrill is very explicitly from the space, which to me means it's Old One Tech, and that makes so much sense that it's the most. Why it has all these insane properties and it's so powerful and it's so good at holding runes and all of these very convenient things that it does. It's Old One Tech.
Yeah, I agree. I don't agree officially in that it isn't. Nowhere does it say it is, but as far as I'm freaking concerned, it is, because it makes sense of the situation. And why would you add extra worlds of complication to something that we can just simply say, obviously, this type of meteoric iron, which is not the only type of meteoric iron, let's be very clear here. There's multiple examples of meteoric iron inside the lore that are effectively steel.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I think the Empire has a suit of meteoric iron that isn't Gromrill as a magic item.
Exactly, it's steel, and it's good steel. Now, you might be going, well, steel is a magic metal. Steel is superb. Making steel is really hard. And particularly for the technological levels that they have, steel is a tiny amount of the overall iron that they're working with. Steel is special, and getting a huge chunk of meteoric steel arriving in perfect form, it's this magic metal that just works and is hard and is brilliant. If you don't know about steel and how it was actually made, go do a bit of research and you realize just how awesome steel is. That is meteoric iron, and it exists. Sky metal or sky iron or whatever else you want to call it, Gromrill side is more and is almost certainly lighter as well, allowing the dwarves to literally cover themselves top to toe in it and have enormous weapons that normally would be very difficult to wield. In fact, impossible to wield if they were made out of normal iron stroke steel. So, long story short, yeah.
And bonus to anyone that tallied how many times Andy said steel in that.
Steel. Oh, WPKM. Toss, The Tome of Salvation is my favorite second edition book. I read it religiously, which, because it's The Tome of Salvation. I see what you did there. Delighted that you like it. A lot of work went into that one. Baron von Bastard. Got a what if idea. What if the Dragon Emperor joined the Old Ones and thus joined and supported the Lizardmen during and beyond the Cataclysm with his kids?
That's kind of an interesting what if. I could put that as a potential. I might do some slight edits to the way it's worded, but
yeah, ditto. I think that could work, but it would change both sides significantly. Because the core of what makes Cathay is very much their anti-god stance. And the core of what makes the Old Ones is that the gods were a part of their plan. So we have a core difference there that would need to be somehow aligned. Sprite Apple asks, could Tretch Craventail dethrone Cratch Doomclaw?
It is highly unlikely. But Tretch is how do I say this? Tretch is a bit of a goober who pulls off some very interesting successes from unlikely situations. He's kind of like a mini Thankful in a lot of ways. So, like, is it possible? I mean, anything's possible, and he is very lucky. But no one has successfully killed a member of the Council of 13 for 200 years. So, more than likely, no.
Sounds good to me. Aleph. Hey, Aleph, thanks very much for the super chat. Sotek, what's your favorite Imperial province and a fun fact about it? Then, Andy, what's your favorite Lizardman city and a fun fact about that? Favorite is always. I hate favorite questions because I like them all. Do you not understand? I love them all. So my one's most definitely going to be. I'll just pick the first one that pops to mind. Okay, let's now think of a fun fact for why that popped into mind. So what are you going to go with an imperial province?
I think for me, I would probably go. This is gonna be a little silly, but for me, I really like Sterling, and it's because everyone else hates them so fucking much.
I like Sterling.
There's something genuinely funny about how Sterling is kind of fucked up, and it really struggles in a lot of really great ways where they genuinely do fight the good fight against Sylvania, but kind of because of their circumstances and because of what they have to deal with, everyone else just seems to really fucking hate them and just sees them as these like super obnoxious country bumpkins that sometimes may or may not get a little too friendly with their wildlife. And they are Sterling is just the butt of so many jokes that I genuinely really, really love them for that, because it adds a lot of character that makes them very relatable in a real world sense. Where I who hasn't grown up in a place where either someone in your, there's a town near you or an area or region or a state or whatever that you're like, oh, fuck those guys. Like everywhere that comes from that place fucking sucks. But it's like almost in a familial way as opposed to a genuinely hatred way. And Sterling, I think, codes into that very, very well, which I like. If I was playing a human Wolfrip character in I think an online campaign, like something like LAWhammer, that was long term, I think playing a Sterlinger that has a huge chip on their shoulder about it would be very fun and would be a very funny character to enjoy.
Like it. I'm going to keep mine nice and simple. I'm going to go with, because I don't have a favorite, so I'm just going to go with the first. Itza. And why is Itza my best? Well, I'm trying so hard not to make jokes. No, it's not because of that. It's because all the bestest stuff happens there. I like that that's where the biggest banishment spells come out from. Lord Croak doing his stuff. All the bestest stuff comes from Itza. And that's bullshit, but I'm going with that one. Baron von Bastard! Which Games Workshop lore retcon were you happiest about? Oh, where do we start?
Female Bretonnian Knights.
Bretonnian Knights, yeah, that seems to be a pretty good one. See, my problem is that I am naturally a whiner, so I remember first all the things that piss me off before I go, oh no, there was the good ones. And there are so many that annoyed me.
To be fair, it is the safer default stance with GW.
It is. So I'm going to go with one that's not Games Workshop. And I'm going to go with one that people ask me about a lot because they expect me to be upset about it, but I'm not. And that is the upgrade for Kislev. That was made by Creative Assembly when they were building their version of Kislev for Total War. Now, do I like all of it? No, I wish the hags were a bit more haggy, and they're a little bit more like the hags that were inside the realms of the Ice Queen. But broadly speaking, I think they did a very good job, and I really like seeing the Ice Court doing its thing. They changed the Ice Witches for that Ice Court, developing further. If anything, I would actually say they went in a very different direction, because they basically said, our Ice Witches get cold. Which struck me as weird, because they wrapped them in fur and gave them big fur coats and gave them big fur hats, where the Ice Witches that I'd built are immune to the cold. And they purposefully wear very light, thin dresses to show that they are not affected by Mother Kislev, who is very much a part of them. And they changed that completely. But nevertheless, when I saw it, I was like, that looks freaking cool. And I can see why they chose what they did. But nevertheless, the little things, inevitably, I'm always going to call out.
A bonus second one I'll give real quick is making it where Grand Cathay, the rulers are actual dragons that can shapeshift, which is what a lot of people really hoped for. But like, if you go back and read the old lore, it always felt more like they were just people that just had fancy names, but they were just humans. But taking it be like, nope, they're full fucking dragons. Like, oh, so good. I was so happy.
Aleph, combining a love of Warhammer and ASMR, plus hearing Andy Skaven affirmations in LAWhammer, which characters have the most successful YouTube careers and what's their genre? Who had the skeeviest drama?
I mean, unfortunately,
bloody hell.
Yeah, unfortunately, I know how the interweb works. So the Mask and Nakari would have extremely successful online careers and would make bank compared to no one else would be even close. No one else would be even close.
Yeah.
That being said, the amount of my favorite online character, bar none, like no one would compete with him, would be Thankful. Because Thankful, by his very nature, would be a character that would be canceled, but somehow come back so many times that it would be just a whole epic saga of people categorizing his rise and fall. Because he'd be the ultimate drama tuber. He would be hilarious.
Oh, that has amused me no end. Wander Alpha. Would the weaponization of grudges by the Northern Dwarfs to pin demons in the now so they could be killed cause chaos to isolate them and push the Norskins to destroy them?
So, I'm gonna.
So, I will drop in one thing on this one. I think that there is something here that's interesting, and the idea that not necessarily the weaponization of grudges, but the weaponization of pinning demons into the material. It would be deeply heretical with a capital H, as in inviting the Chaos Gods to influence what you're doing, because you would effectively be creating chaos artifacts if you were pinning them in reality, which would be long-term of benefit to chaos. But I definitely think this is something that some dwarves have attempted to do. There's even a few hints at this at various parts, particularly in Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay 1, where various dwarf characters have bound demons, and their thinking being to stop the demons doing anything anywhere else. But it does, however, have a problem. Demons kind of don't exist with time. Just because it's bound there doesn't mean that it won't be unbound literally at the same time somewhere else, because demons are outside of time in a very strange way. They have weird rules in the material realm, but it would take something special to do something similar to this.
Yeah, I think if you were gonna run with this in a really interesting way and try and make it something that reached beyond the typical, I think you would have to deal with a completely fucking insane mad dwarf.
Yeah.
Who is doing something that is completely
the mad.
Yeah. If only there was one of those around somewhere.
Yeah.
I think there is something you could do with that. And that, I mean, you can make an entire campaign revolving around that.
Yeah, you could. I think there's a lot here potentially, Alpha, but I think that it has a fundamental lack of understanding of demons as a problem, but it's not an insurmountable one. It's one that, for example, a very clever master rune could potentially get around by effectively wrapping time around into a loop, stopping certain things from happening. There is a good potential story in there, but no dwarf would accept it. It's wrong.
It would
it's
be
just wrong.
Yeah, that would be like an outcast. I will say, I think your idea of it being a dwarf who maybe somehow gets taken in and influences a very strange Norscan tribe that's hidden somewhere in the mountains of Norska, and he has like a group of humans around him that have accepted him and are like pushing, they follow his teachings and stuff. You could do a really cool story with that.
Yeah, you could.
Everybody would hate those guys, even though you could argue what they're doing could theoretically save the world, but it would also be super fucking dangerous. There's a story there.
Thanks for that one. Super Orlok, I don't have any specific questions, but I just want to thank you guys for all the inspiration you guys have given me. You have inspired me to think more deeply about both Warhammer or my own fiction, I presume. And thank you for saying so, because that's what we're here for, to inspire.
Yeah, appreciate it.
Yeah, appreciate that loads. The Hobby Squire. It might be because I got some brain rot, but during the Gorbash stream, I could only see him through the story lens that he was an isekai protagonist. What do you think would be a good title for his show? I'm an orc!
I mean, I will say, there's a very unfortunate thing where the way Japanese translates to English a lot of isekais have very stupid titles, like The Time I Reincarnated as a Slime, which is like a very, very popular one. So it would probably be something stupid like The Time I Was Reincarnated as an Orc. And that would just be the name of the show.
Yeah, almost certainly. The time I was reincarnated as the Orc Gorbad, but I done good.
I find it very funny. I have to move on. I have to move on before I say something else.
Me too. Dynamite95. Are there any Warhammer stories, novels about relatively small players in the Warhammer world living through major events but not being the big players, like a random group of Empire soldiers fighting in a war or something? Yes, a whole chunk of them. In fact, I would point out one in particular because it's the first one that came to my mind. I think it was Robin Lowe who wrote it. The Angelica Fleischer novels. She's just a robber of battlefields. So there's all manner of battles going on, and she ends up through the course of the story witnessing all manner of stuff in a similar fashion to what you're describing there. It's also got a really nice description of Heidelberg, which is down in the north of the Border Princes by Blackfire Pass, and has a blessed priestess, Pergunda, who lives there. That's one that I drew on my augur career. So if you look at my augur career over on the LAWhammer site, you will see a picture of her too.
Yeah, the first book, because they become more important in the stuff they get involved with in the second and third book. But the first Blackheart's book does this. Yep. There's also I can't remember the name of it. There's a, I think it's technically a short story or a novella, not a full novel. But there's a story about, I think it's during Grom's invasion of the Empire. It follows a group of outriders who are trying to deal with an Isle of Gork that's just part of his wall. It's a really fun story of just like this really narrow, frankly inconsequential battle that's taking place like on the absolute outskirts of a major war.
Yeah, good. Oh, cripes. You've done it again, down the man. Oh, poof. Right, so I had an idea for a mysterious location within the Warhammer world. I would appreciate those feedback. The Dread Ant Rocks. Dread Ant Rocks. I feel like there's a joke there. Basically, a group of hills inhabited by jackal to lion-sized ants. They are not aggressive, but are very defensive if you get near their nest entrances. More mysterious on nights when Morrsleep is full. They can all be heard chittering in unison underground.
Sure.
I don't
really have anything else to add. Sure.
Yeah, sure. Luigi Super.
Real quick.
You do grab your one. Go.
Yeah, I think this would be the perfect name. I've been reincarnated into an orc and now I must walk. That would be the name. That's good.
That's it. Luigi Super, you said the Empire is fascist. Well, it's not really. I started being sort of tongue-in-cheek when I said that, but sure. I see them more as a Holy Roman Empire type monarchy. Feudalism wasn't democratic or fair, but it wasn't nationalistic and totalitarian. But the Empire kind of is. The Empire has the concept of state, which the Holy Roman Empire didn't. It's far more about empire, and we're better than everything else. Where if we go back in the past, all the individual little groups, they were often moving from one place to another in terms of who they swore to. The empire is much worse than the real world Holy Roman Empire. But I also don't really think it's fascist per se. It's just got a lot of fascist tendencies which are easily glossed over because all we're really concerned about is a war game. But it's not the same as the Holy Roman Empire by any stretch, really. It's quite different in a way that I didn't expect when I very first read it when I was a kid. The Blow Person, what are your favourite gods this evening? And why are they?
the Grand Sow
of the Grismiri. My favourite god at the moment? What's yours? Do you have one? I mean, I'm going to be very hard not to say Elven gods because I've been writing Elven god shit lately. I don't want to do Elven gods again because it just happens to be what I'm writing. It's fucking Hecate, because I'm doing fucking Hecate right now. I'm doing some extra bits for it. So it's Hecate, in particular, because I was organising some bits for Marathi for my own game. And that's it. There's no other reason. That's what I've been thinking on and how the influence of the various gods that are often caught up underneath the umbrella of pleasure cults and what they mean and how they manifest. I've been looking into that a fair bit, and Hecate is my current favorite.
I mean, today's a pretty average day for me, so that means it's a pretty Sotek day. I do like my big snake god. There's a reason I dubbed myself the way I did.
Elemental exposure. Can lady dwarves become slayers? Yes. Can they cut their hair into mohawks like guys? Yes. Super easy, barely an inconvenience. I even drew one back in the middle of the 2000s, I think, but they absolutely can. Now, do they have a different cultural position to male dwarves? Absolutely, definitely. And is a female dwarf taking the Oath of the Slayer a big event potentially for a local clan? Definitely, because there's far fewer females than there is males in each one of the various tribes. Not all, but most.
Yeah, so, actually, the answer would be no, actually, because you spelled it with a V. You said dwarves, which means it'd be a total dwarf, and they can't become slayers.
So I was trying not to call out the spelling, but yeah, that's a grudging
with an F.
Ricky Chapman, thanks very much. We remember earning Devonger in a campaign. We recovered an Anvil of Doom that was not lost and a small cache of runic weapons. I mean, that's pretty good. An Anvil of Doom. That's pretty damn brilliant.
That's a good one.
Yep, love that one, Ricky. Amazing name. Totally is. Are there any good lore examples of just how physically strong and fast a vampire would be? Like one with quick blood and iron sinews?
Ooh, gosh, it's been a long time since I've read Vampire Slayer.
So I'm just going to pull out one of the oldest examples, and that's Genevieve. There's multiple examples throughout her books of her doing things like, hey, I look like a 16-year-old girl. Crush, that was stone. Yep, I'm a vampire. There we go. So yes.
Just read the Ulrika trilogy, because Ulrika, like, you get her point of view of her becoming a vampire, and like one of the opening scenes of the first book is when she's literally like, she like picks up and like rips in half a horse with a knight on it, and you're like, oh, okay.
So yeah, 100%. Ulrika, Shadishian. Would you rather fight 6 ogre-sized snotlings, holy crap, or 66 snotling-sized ogres? I'd rather fight neither. Also excited for Snowtick's adventures in Scotland. Maybe. May the haggis be plentiful.
It's not my first time to Scotland, to be clear. I've been there before. But I would definitely much rather fight 66 snotling-sized ogres. And just really hope none of them have the giant killer big name.
Yeah, you can kick him. I mean, those 6 ogre-sized snotlings will kill me, definitely.
Yeah, one ogre-sized snotling would own my ass.
Yeah, totally. It would just be the worst. I mean, truly awful. Which city in Kislev has the most students? Kislev. I think most would say either the Great Port of Verningrad or Kislev itself. It's Kislev City. However, I would counter with the lesser-known city of Undergrad.
Wow.
It was going somewhere, Dino Man! I appreciate it. You know why I appreciate this one in particular? Because I can still see myself over the top of your comment.
Real quick, Violet, are the Ulrika books good for someone new? So technically you can just jump into them and it's not going to kill you. I would heavily recommend starting with Gotrek and Felix and get through Vampire Slayer before you start the Ulrika trilogy, because it's going to be referencing a lot of things that you're going to completely miss otherwise.
Yeah, if you want a down-to-earth, grounded story in the Warhammer world with a female lead, the aforementioned Angelica Fleischer books are pretty decent. They're well written. They tell an interesting story down the south of the Empire, and the lore is pretty decent. It's not too bad, although they're Marius Lightdorf. Ricky Chapman!
By the way, the Jabberslite taming did go better than expected, only the Skaven died laughing, riding it off a cliff because his man catcher got stuck in the Jabberslite's head. Perfect.
Oh, Ricky.
Perfect.
Watchdog 3079, what are your thoughts regarding the genre of grimdark and how most writers fail and succeed in sticking to it, or even noble dark or grim bright? I have an opinion on this. My opinion is deeply modified by my good pal Graham Davis. And he was writing for Warhammer before the concept of grimdark was a thing. He was writing what he thought would work. And the grim darkness of the far-flung future, or, you know, grim and perilous adventures, whatever else there was, didn't have that grim dark aesthetic. Instead, what it had was, it was telling incredibly bleak stories, but it used humour to do so, and indeed often satire and humour was the core component of it. And that has been lost by many a grimdark writer. They have forgotten that for something to be dark, it needs to have something to be in contrast to. And it doesn't need to be humour. It needs to be something that isn't grimdark. If everything's grimdark, kind of nothing is. It's just misery porn. It's not actually doing what you want. If you want something to be grim, you've got to start with something that isn't, or you have to contrast it with something that isn't. And a classic example of this, if you want to read outside of the grimdark literature, Stephen King. What he always does is says, take a look at this normal thing. Watch how I fuck it up. And he hits it with whatever the story is. And he does this just as well with his non-horror stories as he does with his more realistic or more grounded stories, where he takes normal characters and puts them through extremes. And those extremes look extreme because the beginning point isn't. Grimdark only succeeds when it is counterpointed by something, and that's what I think most grimdark writers, no, many grimdark writers fail at. And those who succeed at sticking it are the ones who say, look at this horror and look how different it is to the other thing, and it really lets you understand just how dark it's become. Because without it, it kind of goes wrong.
Yeah, the big thing for me is that I don't tend to like modern grimdark because I find that authors tend to come in and it feels like they're like, oh, I'm going to write something so grim. I'm going to write something so dark. And it like that, instead of just telling a good story that happens to end up being grimdark, it ends up being a pile of just garbage because it's trying to stick so hard to a genre trope, which I really don't like. Also, admittedly, I tend to furrow my brow when someone immediately throws up grimdark as their advertisement, because in my experience, I'm not saying this is always the case, this is just in my experience, it tends to kind of be a flag of someone. It's like when you see a community and they're like, we're a free speech community that allows people to say what they want to say, which is just code for them being like, we're super racist assholes that want to say really not okay shit, but it's grimdark, so it's okay. And it's like, okay, whatever, fine. So I don't like it generally. Like Warhammer Fantasy, I consider to be a grimdark setting because it blows up in the end. Everybody dies. That's the end. So by that definition, it's grimdark. But I like that Warhammer Fantasy does not advertise itself as grimdark, because if it did, authors would come in and do really stupid shit. And I'm really glad they don't.
Yes, to all of that. Ricky Chapman, we found another example of a mortal turning into a demon like Skulltaker. In Lords of Excess, a man becomes a bloodthirster named Gravemaker, not a demon prince. Yeah, as we discussed back in that stream, the differences between demon prince, greater demon, lesser demon, whatever, are significantly more muddy when you move out of the war game. They are significantly less certain. So this is probably not the only example. There will be multiple different examples of demons who come from unexpected sources.
I want to bring this up, Avani. Yes, I like this version of grimdark, the Rage Against the Dying of the Light trope, which is, to me, is what Warhammer Fantasy is. It's raging against the inevitable victory of chaos, which some people might view as pointless, but I actually find very, very inspiring. Which is just a matter of taste.
Kurishima, Dune Imperium versus 40k Imperium. Who would win?
See, this would require me to know a lot about either, which I don't. But what I will say is I believe the Dune Imperium has a way more reliable and less dangerous version of faster than light travel, which gives them a hysterical advantage.
Yeah, it really does.
And I will say, Imperium fans seem to be really fucking bad about remembering whenever they put sci-fi empires up against 40k, that the 40k Imperium is fucking god awful at getting around.
It is really bad at it. Hilariously so. We're off! We've arrived 49 years later! God damn it! That wasn't the plan! Damn those warp storms. Anyway, Hammond! Can't spell democratic without rat.
It's so true. He got us there. He got us there.
Certainly true. Captain Magma Pyro, you all gonna touch Oblivion Remaster? I've already bought it. Could imagine you two being into Elder Scrolls. Totally am. Tons of fun lore that's almost batshit as Warhammer. Totally is. It wouldn't surprise me if Lindsay hasn't gone to bed yet and is still through there playing a game that she's already completed multiple times.
I cannot tell you how deeply upset that I am that they released this when they did. I am genuinely infuriated because I'm already playing Total War Warhammer campaigns and trying to get through Final Fantasy 14, and then they drop this fucking shit on me. I'm very upset. I'll probably play it tonight after the stream.
There you go. You heard it first there. Reminder, says Avani DK, that's better. Reminder that more than a few of the enchanted swords from myths and legends are thought to probably have just been steel swords at the time. Yep, you're absolutely spot on, when most were iron bronze weapons. Comments for the steel is awesome tirade from Andy. You're absolutely correct. I mean, particularly if you look at, say, some of the old stories of High Brazil and similar, where there's all manner of magic swords rounding from the Excaliburs, your Excaliburs et al., who were all... that were all probably based on just meteoric iron steels that were steel weapons, or weapons that had somehow happened upon steel during their various heating processes with the iron and got themselves a carbonized bit of steel at the edge of it, slowly combined it together into a decent weapon. So yeah, completely agreed. And yeah, magic weapons are steel. Steel is a magic substance, and it's very, very, very good at what it does. And pretty special in a Renaissance style world. Ian O'Brien, leaving my what if that I posted up before. What if someone other than Tekla supported the Empire during the Great War against Chaos? That's quite a good what if. But when we do our what ifs, we generally don't go broad, we go specific. So this one would
easy
be,
way would be, what if Tyrion went instead of Teclis?
They lose.
Not necessarily.
They lose.
Or I wonder if it maybe if it would be like, what if one of the dragon children came instead of Teclis?
Yeah, that would be fascinating.
That way it's still a wizard character. But they bring the teachings of this is how we teach humans magic.
Yeah, and the difference that would make to
I love that. That's on the list.
That's a good one. Put that on the list. Yep. We've got if you're out there thinking of good what ifs, we've got an entire thread open of what if potentials over in the LAWhammer channel as well. So go take a check. Go take a check of those and add your own ideas if you would like as well, because that's quite a good one. Love that.
Yeah, that's a great one. Thank you.
Grimdark Hammond, because hey, let's come in the Grimdark version of Hammond. When are you asking Fudge Muppet guys to be on the Lorebeards podcast? I highly recommend reaching out. Who are Fudge Muppet?
That sounds like...
I don't watch YouTube or any equivalent. I'm an old man. Look at me with my grey beard. I don't know anything. If they're cool and you think that they match, then someone, I mean...
Are they big into Warhammer? If so, then...
Who are they? Does anyone have comments on this one? That would be nice. Quinn! My GM likes your ideas of chorfs having flight and has made World War I-esque biplanes made by demon smiths and piloted by suicidal guard that do strafing runs with a demonic munition mat guns. Thoughts? Holy shit! I think I would rather than biplanes, I would probably go a little more organic to support the demonic engine style. So I'd probably go with some form of ornithopter rather than biplane.
Yeah, look into the Black Kraken from Dreadfleet, of like the biological mechanical hybridization type aspect of demon. Because the thing you have to remember about demon machines, demon engines, is that they're alive. So, look at the Hell Cannon. Look how organic parts of the Hell Cannon are. Most demon engines are they're functionally living machines.
And I think that's what you really want to support. So more of an ornithopter. So an ornithopter is basically a big flapping bird machine. The ornithopters from Dune got turned into insects rather than birds. The original Dune ones were ornithopters, more bird-like than they were insect-like. But I think that their insect ones in Dune are fucking awesome, so you won't hear me complain about them. But ornithopter might be a slightly better version. If you want to get ideas of that in fantasy, go read the Hawkmoon trilogy by Michael Moorcock, the Tragic Millennium books. They're really short, only about 120, 150 pages, something like that each. And in there, they've got an equivalent of the British Empire in a post-apocalyptic world, and they use ornithopters of a variety of different kinds, and it might give you some inspiration for how they could potentially manifest. Dynaman95, do you think the word maps of Warhammer typically have a Mercator-like project, the world maps, I presume, Mercator-type protection? Also, sorry for all the long questions. No, don't be sorry. I was kind of making a joke, but it is nice when they're this size. So, thank you. I don't think Mercator is at all in the minds of the Warhammer mappers at Games Workshop when they're making it. Often, fantasy mappers don't understand how maps are made, and they actually think that this 2D representation is a good representation of the world that they're making. And I kind of know this to be a fact because I have spoken to some of the people responsible for the maps, and when I say you do realize that the distances at the top of your map will not be accurate to the distances at the bottom of your map, because that's not how 2D works on a curved surface. And I literally had a face look at me saying, I don't understand. I don't understand. Why won't it be 110 miles from here to here at this part of the map and be 150 at the bottom part, and that'll be different distances? What do you mean the scale isn't accurate? It's like, unless you're very small, the scale is always going to be inaccurate. The second you reach the size of an entire realm in one of the Warhammer realms, or the Old World, for example, it's going to be broken all over the place. And I gave them an example of using the Empire with proper curved lines to show 40 miles at different points in the Empire, and their minds were blown, because they suddenly realized that their Empire was a different shape to what the Empire would actually be. And they were like, oh dear. And I was like, well, exactly. It doesn't actually matter. But I think that the answer to this is actually no. The projection they use doesn't exist. It isn't until later Warhammer maps and you see them sort of curved that you get an idea that they've got an idea that that's going on. But broadly speaking, I don't think Mercator is the one they've used.
I always love when you see people saying maps for the first time of like, here's what like Greenland and Russia look like on our maps versus how big they actually are. And you're like, oh, okay.
They're a lot smaller than I thought they were.
Yeah.
Infernal Guard, to my last question. Oh gosh, what one was that on? Was that with the, that'll be the Chaos Dwarves, obviously.
Probably the ships.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah. Piloted by Infernal Guard, as opposed to Suicidal Guard.
that does make sense.
That's very funny.
Grimdark Canon, Holy Roman Empire isn't holy, nor Roman, nor an empire. It's more of a heretical Germanic confederacy, but the one in Warhammer is long live Sigmarus Caesar, pardon me, which, you know, is not that wrong. To a degree.
Yeah.
Super Orlok and the Elrica trilogy won't kill a new fan. What Warhammer book series will? Oh,
Nagash.
The End Times.
The Nagash trilogy. The Nagash trilogy.
Nah, if you read it in isolation, you don't know anything about the lore, it's fine.
The second you step outside of it, it is like a brick to the face.
But the End Times books are all pretty much just event after event after event after event.
Yeah.
And the stories are often lost in the events that they're attempting to tell, which makes them not the best books to start with. Now, if you understand all those events, better.
Especially the novels, because the novels don't explain that they're encapsulations of the actual bigger stories, which are even more ridiculous and stupid than the big stories that they're trying to focus on. It's End Times definitely.
So End Times is the answer I give that one. Sean Schultz, Andy, a follower and priest of Nurgle, a trope now. God, I hope I'm not.
I'm sure that's what many Nurgle followers have said along their journey.
Name. A continuation of my last question, but just how does age affect a vampire's strength? Is it more so just because of the time they obtain more information, understand themselves more?
So what I will say to this is that Warhammer has a trope that is very important to understand when you're looking at the universe, which is that the older something gets, the scarier it gets, is a general rule of thumb. Yeah. Especially with things that live beyond like a normal lifespan, which obviously vampires do. So with vampires, the older they are, the scarier they are, is a pretty damn reliable rule of thumb. Now there can be exceptions to that. For example, if like a vampire for some reason hasn't been feeding properly for long periods of time, that can cause their powers to diminish. But some authors also make it where, oh no, it actually causes them to transform into big, horrific, awful monsters, which in some ways makes them more powerful. So I would say generally yes, and the reasons why is as long as you want it to be. They have a better understanding of their powers over time. Sure, they just become bigger and bigger, like locais of dark magic. Sure, they just get more powerful naturally because their bodies are always slightly swelling in size and strength, like you see with Strigoi. Sure, there's a infinite number of answers.
All of that and more. I agreed completely. Do I want to say no? That'll do. Daniel L, any thoughts on Kingdom Come Deliverance? I backed it when it was first a Kickstarter, and I didn't play it. I don't know why I didn't play it. I got sent the bloody disc through the mail. I popped it in my console and still didn't play it. I've still yet to bloody play the game. I've got everything for it, still not played it, so I didn't buy the second one because I hadn't played the first one yet. So my thoughts are, God damn it, why have I not played it?
I would love to at some point because everyone I know fawns over it, which means it must be good. So one day I will.
Alaflux, if Warhammer 5th was made with paths and oaths to distinguish the species, how would you distinguish LZM?
Lizardmen.
Lizardmen. Good. And halflings mechanically.
Lizardmen, you would do it with sacred spawnings.
And it's easy. Sacred spawnings, definitely. Halflings, I mean, do they need to have special mechanics for this? I mean, when you're looking at paths and oaths, we're basically talking religion. And halfling religion is not a core component of their society. They have gods, but they're not ones who wander around worshipping and praising them and doing all that stuff. That's big, tall folk stuff. Really, they're mostly interested in their life and living it well. So they don't really need this sort of rules. They don't lie in that area. If anything, their rules should be much more cleanly. We're not affected by the same stuff all of you are affected anywhere near the same extent. And we also like food. So perhaps there should be some sort of halfling chef thing. I know I'm making a halfling chef career.
If you were going to be like, oh, I want the halflings to have a similar chapter, like all of these other races have that kind of chapter, I would probably delve more into family clans. And like really cultural. I'd go really heavy on culture stuff.
Yeah, me too. I mean, when we were building the core clans for the halflings, it was me and Andy Lease that were building these. So the core clans that were manifest in the Reichland, the core clans that we manifest elsewhere, it was all about building up very close family units because they live in each other's pockets, quite literally. Your average halfling family, let's say average halfling building will have anywhere up to about 20 to 40 halflings inside it. They all live together. They're not as isolationist as humanity, where they'll rarely have more than about 8 to 12 sitting inside one building. They will just have loads of them all inside the same family space, ranging through multiple generations. But all the families work differently, and that's probably what I definitely rely on. I agree. Good idea. Amadeus Arkham. What if Arkham the Black came to council and helped Magnus prepare and fight against chaos? Would be interesting, unlikely, but interesting, especially if he knows stuff about Sigmar when he had that crown of sorcery, and thus bring the cult of Sigmar around to his unique way of thinking.
So what I would say to this is him showing up and kicking in the door to talk chat Magnus would probably be a little silly. But I do think that you could very easily tell a story about a Sigmarite that meets Archon the Black. And Archon the Black is able to influence them with stories about how he's met Sigmar. He fought Sigmar. He actually knows Sigmar. And Archon the Black being a source for kind of a subcult that kind of pops up within the cult of Sigmar that's trying to influence things. Because you're right, the Archon the Black would hate chaos. Hate it. Hate it. So I would not put this past him. I mean, Archon the Black travels, he gets around. Like there's a whole story about him and Khalida going up into Sylvania to kill Mandragon, who's one of the big bad von Karsteins, who had the Staff of Nagash, and Archon swipes it from him after Khalida kills him. So I think the idea that there would be a group of Sigmarites that are influenced by truths, which I would put heavy emphasis on truths, revealed to them by Archon about Sigmar, there is definitely a story there.
Yeah. But your average Sigmarite's going to tell him to fuck off, and it's not going to end well. He's a bloody walking skeleton.
Yeah, it would.
I mean, he's pretty much the antithesis of everything that the Sigmarites stand for. They literally have frescoes with Sigmar beating living crap out of Nagash. They're not going to listen to anything he says under normal circumstances. He's one big giant liar, regardless of what truth he maybe will come. But this is what happened. Shut up.
Yeah, he would
with my hammer.
It would be much more likely he would use it through an agent or disguise himself or something. But I can absolutely see this being a storyline.
Yeah, you could get there, but you'd have to write a good one.
Yeah, especially I will say, especially if you're going with the LAWhammer version of certain elements of Sigmar, Archon the Black would know things. He would know things.
Wednesday stream idea, says Ricky. Watching fan film stuff like Chaos Rising. Yay. And that one Lizardman versus Chaos animated short film.
I would, we can definitely do that from time to time.
To them and ask.
Yeah, but that would be the thing, is I would want to reach out and ask for permission for the sake of this kind of show. I know media sharing is very, very popular among content creators, but I like to stay on the side of like, hey, is it cool that we do this, so that they know about it? Because
agreed.
I know it's not required, but it's just good manners.
It's just good manners, and we're good guys at heart, honest. Dynamite, given that El Kalabad is so distant from Araby proper, I could see it like the Kilwa Sultanate in real life. A sultanate in East Africa founded by a Persian prince. Thoughts? Sure. Yeah, sure. And, yeah, sure. I have little else to say other than, yes, that would make a pretty decent model to base your ideas from if you were looking to create something whole cloth, particularly if you didn't know what to do. Go read up, take some ideas, think about how it works, adapt it into something new. Ted Barrera. We know Gotrek's axe is extremely powerful. Oh, hell yeah. But how about Felix Sword Caragul? How strong a dragon can it potentially take on, as it was able to block the fire breath of Skjalandir, a warpstone empowered dragon?
So,
thanks very much, by the way. Very generous.
Kind of a bit of a silly thing about Caragul is that based on its name and the way it acts, it probably is supposed to be a runic weapon, but for some reason it's treated as more of just kind of a generic enchanted weapon, which it really doesn't act like. It acts like a runic weapon. Like if you do your research into runic weapons, the weapon itself hates dragons. And the weapon itself is capable of identifying what is considered a dragon and what isn't, which is how dwarf runes work. Of like, if you read into like the rune of dragon slaying and how it requires like a rune lord to take their hatred, their grudge against dragons, and they're literally putting that hatred into whatever it is they're making. That is quite literally how Caragul works. So I would argue it's a runic weapon. Is it as strong as Gotrek's axe? No. But is it really good for what it is? Yes. Yeah. Like it's a bonkers weapon. Like it cuts through dragons like butter, and it blocks their attacks. Like the fact that it throws up a barrier against a very big pissed off dragon's fire says a lot. That says a lot.
Yeah, agreed. To the point that when I was drawing my version of Felix, I made it a dwarf weapon and I put bloody dwarf runes on it because holy fucking shit, it's obviously a dwarf weapon. More obvious than you can possibly make it without actually telling the artist to go and draw the bloody weapon properly and put the runes on it. God damn it.
Yeah, I mean,
that's what it should have.
That thing at least has like the master rune of dragon slaying and like probably 2 or 3 counts of the rune of warding against fire, which already makes it pretty fucking scary. Like, that's a pretty top-tier rune weapon.
Kurin Shima! How Warhammer races, factions, species, because I won't use the word races for lots of different species, view homosexuality.
They don't care.
Don't care. I mean, obviously, you're going to get lots of individuals who are bigoted for one reason or another. The Warhammer world is a bigoted place. Let us not be liars about this. They often have many bigoted views. I mean, after all, who likes a Stirlander? So tech. But bigoted views are real, and to pretend that they don't exist is to make an almost farce of a world. But in the Warhammer world, we have very real gods who often have very odd or indistinguishable from male or female genders. And they are often doing things with others in ways that make their various myths very, let's say, strange. And they're real. They're real. Homosexuality just doesn't matter. Manan will often wed entire communities together. Okay, the idea of weddings being just between one man and one woman is not a Warhammer thing. That's a real world thing. So, not an issue. And some species, 100% not an issue.
Literally, the only place I could ever see this really coming up as being a thing is if you had some kind of cult or something that was deeply, deeply obsessed with the concept of like birth is like a really important thing that is very sacred to our God. We need to be doing it as much as possible. And they could have like quirks about it of like, oh, well, these people should be together because they're not going to produce a kid.
Yeah. Totally.
But that would be very niche. Or it's like personal things, like someone not liking, looking for a reason not to like people that are different. And pointing and saying, well, they do this and I don't do that. So that's unnatural and I hate them. Because that's a very human thing to do.
Yeah, it really is. So not something you really need to worry about. Watchdog 3079, a very cool collab, I think, would be either Book of Choyer or Zach and Zake for TES goodness. I am lost.
So Watchdog, I don't, for the sake of Lorebeards, I don't think we'd ever really do an Elder Scrolls video.
The Elder Scrolls, of course. I was just talking about it earlier.
Yeah, probably not something we'd ever do on here. That being said, Book of Choyer, I would not be shocked if we had him on at some point because he does a lot of Warhammer Fantasy stuff. Zach and Zake, cool. I don't know who that is off the top of my head, but if they do Warhammer stuff, then yeah, maybe.
Yeah, drop in the comments.
Yeah.
Daniel L, speaking of species rules, what about ogres and gnomes? In what way?
In regards to like how we were saying, like elves have the pats, dwarves have oaths. So the thing with ogres, the big special rules you'd want for them are the big names. Big names are super core to ogre culture. That is how you become who you are. It's how you earn your name, is that you get big names. You pull off great accomplishments where you do something that's worthy of quite literally building your legacy, building your identity. So I would lean really heavily into the big names. Gnomes, I have no fucking idea.
Gnomes, probably clans. Because they are all very different to each other. Clan Peddler, for example, is completely different to the Clan Trethaway or any of the others. They are all very different, so probably clans. Cycle, number 1. I was reading Josh Reynolds' unused pitches to Games Workshop, and it got me thinking, what would be Andy's favourite idea or pitch that was rejected by Games Workshop? And that would be the book that I sort of half referenced earlier on in this stream of the Phoenix Kings, because I once pitched a book about all the Phoenix Kings to Black Library, and I would really like to have seen that one done. And it did indeed end with a piece by Teclis about the Empire and what was happening there. So a book about the Phoenix Kings, taking it from quite a different angle to the more armyless version. And obviously it would have had a good amount of talk of the various battles that were involved, because it is, after all, Warhammer. And Tech27SS, cheer 100, because it's nice to say it every once in a while. Do you think it is easier for CA to bring back ship battles, Man of War, than GW to allow it back into the light?
Okay. I will say this I've had this conversation many times. CA, I genuinely, deeply feel from personal conversations I've had with a lot of devs, have zero fucking interest whatsoever in adapting a naval game, because it would be a completely new game.
It's a new game.
It would be hyper super focused on a specific element that is not what their games are about. You would want a different company to do this. In fact, a different company did do this. There is a Man of War Corsair.
Yeah.
It's not a pretty game, but functionally it was very fun to play.
It was all right.
I had a great time with it, but
Yeah.
I don't think you could buy it anymore. I think it's got taken down because they lost the license.
Oh, no.
Yeah, GW pulled back the license very deliberately. They had a whole big post on their Steam page. It was very sad, actually. So that being said, I'm pretty sure GW will do something with it eventually. But who's to? Because the fact that they took the license back, because it wasn't that the Man of War Corsair guys didn't want to renew it. They did. They had further DLC plans. GW did not allow them to renew the license, which means that probably there is something else going on in the background somewhere.
And just to bring out the comment there from Executor, spot on. Man of War.
Yeah, it would be a completely different license. Yeah,
absolutely.
And CA don't want to deal with that.
Yeah, totally. Godzilla 2021 would like to know Andy's thoughts on the creation and usage of Zaralid for the Chaos Dwarves DLC from Andy Hall, wanting to do it, while, to my knowledge, was only implied in lore Chorfs spoke a little different. I think it fucking rocks. If you want to know, I think it's great. I think it's a good addition. The idea that the Chaos Dwarves would in any way speak anything similar to what the standard Carrick Dwarves speak is, in my eyes, nonsense. They've had so much time separated from them, isolated from them.
6,000 years, something like that.
It's an enormous amount of time, and language drift is a very real thing. And consider just how much English has changed in just, say, the last 800 years. Just 800 years. In the 800 years, you go back 800 years and you read anything that is in Old English, you're screwed. Just utterly screwed. It's a completely different language. Now, the dwarves have got something that very much means that they want to maintain their ancestors' language. So I can see the Carrick dwarves speaking something very similar to what they would have spoken so many thousand years ago. The Chaos Dwarves don't have that anymore. They've got standard language drift. They have no reason to keep up many of the same linguistic choices that are being held by the Carrick Dwarves. Indeed, they've got a lot of reason to go in a different direction because they are following a different rule, a different religion, a different setup. So I absolutely think it's a good idea, and I'm very pleased to see that it happened. So there you go. What do you think? Agree?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I would hard agree, especially with, because correctly, GW has established that, the Norscan dwarves have a different enough dialect that the Carrick dwarves and the Norscan dwarves can have genuine difficulties understanding each other. The Chaos dwarf should be literally speaking almost a completely different language, which they do, which is great.
Hell, people on this tiny island I live on, all of whom broadly speak English. There are tons of dialects and accents here that I do not understand when I hear them. They're actually bonkers different to standard received pronunciation English. So, yeah, I mean, this is a tiny island across the entire breadth. Sure, there's going to be lots of linguistic drift. Dynaman, how would the Dawi respond to human cultures that perform forms of ancestor veneration and or worship? Would they respect the humans for it, or would they be annoyed that they aren't doing it the proper Dawi way?
I don't think the dwarves would see it as being that relatable, to be honest. Dwarves, and so not all dwarves are the same, first of all. I will say that. Yeah. The second thing I will say is that humans, and this is something a lot of writers can forget sometimes, humans have a very different expression of worship than dwarfs do. Dwarfs don't worship. They just don't. That's not really, they venerate. which is
And
not
emulate.
and emulate. Yeah, which
Yeah.
humans are not really like that. Where a human is more likely to be like, oh, I'm praying to my ancestor that I have a good luck today, or I pray to my ancestor that this thing I do works out, or whatever. And the dwarf would be looking over and saying, why aren't you trying to copy everything your ancestor does? In which the human would say, well, he's been dead for 200 years and the world has changed. I'm going to do different things. I'm my own person. The dwarf would say, how dare you talk like that about your ancestor? So, yeah.
I think that is fundamentally it. You've got an ancestor who's super successful at that thing, so you should be emulating your ancestor. Venerating that ancestor, most certainly not worshipping it, as if that ancestor needs worship. Or we don't have jealous gods here. We don't have ancestors sitting there saying, you will worship me and I am your god, I demand these things. That's just not how dwarves work. And it's also not how most human cults work either. They don't worship like real world religion either, because these gods are actually real and they are often terrifying. It's not so much worship as it is trying to stave them off or attract their attention because they're noted for their goodwill in certain circumstances. So you try to ensure those circumstances are happening in the here and the now. But because you're just a peasant, you turn to somebody who understands the god, a priest or a priestess or some equivalent, and you say, help. And they say, if you do this, you might attract the attention of the god. Okay, now other species will look at that and say, you're worshipping it. And it's like, no, I'm not worshipping the god. I just want Shalia's help because my kid's ill. I just want my Shalia's help. Please, Shalia, help. Because you have the power to do it. Because you're a god. They're real. And it's quite different to how real world religions work and very different to how dwarf religions work inside the world. So I don't think the dwarf is going to care. It's just a different thing. Doing a different thing. And if an ancestor was worshipped by a human, they might discuss it, might even have philosophical discussions in some cases. What do you believe? Why do you believe this? What are you doing? That's interesting. I do it this way. I do it that way. Depends on the dwarf, depends on the human. They might end up killing each other. You never can be certain how it will turn out in Warhammer. They'll probably build a big army. He'll be a slayer next week and they'll be chopping each other up because, hey, it's Warhammer and we've got to get a battle out of this somehow. But yeah, broadly speaking, I don't think it would be much of an issue at all.
Okay, I want to point this out because it just made me laugh. I have a date on Friday. I should be saving my money, but I'm curious. This is like your 5th super chat? Fans gonna be like, hey, can we eat out at Wendy's? Because LAWhammer. We appreciate it, Daniel, but please take care of yourself.
On that, you've you just made me realize I should have changed the thing because you're here. There we go. Lord Beards, that's better.
Yeah, just in time for the last...
Much better. The last few questions.
We'll get to yours in a second. We just gotta get Amadeus real quick. The Elven Mandala.
In LAWhammer, the Elven Mandala is repeatedly said to have 20 symbols or gods. No, it isn't. But all the mandalas that I can find have 22. That is broadly correct. What are the two you aren't considering core? I desperately need this info to base my tinfoil theories on. So, there was a single mandala, which was not Elven, that had 20 symbols for 20 gods.
Yeah, I was going to say, all of the Elven God Mandalas from 8th edition Warhammer Fantasy have 22.
Yeah, but there's more than 22 gods. In fact, there's if you go with all the gods, there's a few extra added by Gav Thorpe's books. He just throws extra names out and says, these are also elven gods, completely ruining the mandalas as they stand. Yeah. So there are much more than 22 gods, much more. If we take the lore as it stands, there's probably at least 30. At least named somewhere in the region of about 27, if I recall. So that already makes the mandalas a bit of a nonsense. But on top of that, this was a symbol in LAWhammer, and I'm confirming nothing until it's confirmed in game. Because why would I ruin that particular mystery?
I just realized I misread your comment, Amadeus. But the mandala. So I will say from like GW published side of things. The mandala was very recent. It literally just popped up in 8th edition out of fucking nowhere, and hilariously has caused mass confusion ever since.
Very funny.
Yeah. So I like go tinfoil with it because that's the only way to deal with it, especially because the Wood Elves hilariously cheat on their mandala so they can add in the Ancients where they combined Aisha and Kurnos for some reason to be like, well, we have to keep it 22 guys, so how are we going to fit 23? They're like, well, what if we just fused these ones together?
Yeah, it's
silly.
It wasn't the best expression of the lore because it was limiting. And you tend to find anything in Warhammer that creates a limit almost certainly has going to be broken by another writer or was broken in the past because you didn't do enough research. And when it comes to the elven gods, there are more than 22. They just are. They're in the lore, in the novels. And you have to ignore parts of lore if you want to do that.
Yeah, it's a cool idea. But I think where the authors kind of goofed it is they tried to make all three elven cultures the exact same, but they just placed them in a different order, and that's where they fucked up. They should have I think if the author had just been like, I'm just gonna throw together a list of gods that might not even be the same list as the other elven cultures, but maybe they all.
It would be really nice if we got a Kadai one. Or Kadai, if you prefer. A Kadai mandala, which was just, the heavenly gods that were worshipped or revered, depending on what you want to say.
It's a cool idea, but they goofed it by trying to be like, this is the definitive gods that all elves worship. And it's like, no.
But it's not, sadly. No. So, that was a thing. Oh, we both did it. How do old world cults, asked Daniel L., mainly Sigmar, Ulrich, Shalia, et al., choose their leaders if the past one dies? I'm pretty sure we've done some of this in light of recent events. Rip Papa Francis.
So we talked about the Grand Theognis earlier.
Yes,
we already answered that. I would say for the sake of time, why don't we just hit our Ulrich and Tal, and then we'll move on.
I can't remember.
There you go.
that I literally can't remember. I wrote the Ulrich one too. I'm pretty
sure the R Ulrich one is established. I just don't remember what it is.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure it's not established. I'm just going through my memory banks, and I'm pretty sure there is no detailed part for how Al Ulrich is replaced. It's not in first edition. Pretty sure it doesn't come up in Empire and Flames, which is where it would have turned up in first edition. I didn't write it into second edition in the Tome of Salvation because I was concentrating on other parts of our Ulrich, so I don't think it's actually written in. And the Hierarch of Tal, I also don't think is properly confirmed.
I think the only thing it says about our Ulrich is that simply that it just says that he's chosen for life, but that's there's no further detail.
The actual detail. Now, for those of you who've been following LAWhammer, you'll know that that's a question that's very, very, very pertinent.
Pertinent, yeah.
So in LAWhammer, and we sadly, it happened in our game just before it happened in equivalent, the real world one. There will be an answer. So I don't have an answer for Ulrich because I'm pretty sure there isn't one. I don't have an answer for Shalia because pretty sure there isn't one. That happens over in Bretonia. I'm pretty sure it's the high priestesses who are all involved with selecting. They have to go all the way over to fricking Bretonia to do the job, but I'm pretty sure it's not detailed. So I'm going to be giving it an answer for the Ulrich one.
Yeah, there had to be some kind of combat trial, I would imagine.
Oh, it's definitely there's gonna have to be. And you tend to find with our Ulrich, once you've got that position, it's almost dishonorable to challenge it, which is why he can last for life. Because most of the positions in the Cult of Ulrich are determined by one-on-one combat. So that's going to occur at some point. Once the chief candidates are put forward, there will be a fight, and you might find that some may only go through the moves so that the preferred candidate gets there, particularly when we're dealing with some of the weird political choices during the time of Three Emperors. But at the moment, when we're on the edge of war, near the end of the world, and Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay 4th edition time, it's going to be a hard-bitten fight. But yeah, there'll be a combat in there somewhere.
I'm just going to grab these real quick because I'm feeling nice. Do you think it's possible that called Hellbrass could be related to Carl Francis? They're both from Reichland. That's like saying, do you think Sotek could be related to a Dallas Cowboy because they both live in the DFW area? Probably not. If you want to make that your personal story, you could, but most likely no. And then, was the Rune of Asmar destroyed during the end times? Yes, it cracked, which is all that it takes.
Indeed. And it became something else, JD. It became something else.
I interrupted after being 20 minutes late.
He's come in, so we're just asking any old thing now. To demonstrate differences in English, one out from shop translates to, do you want anything? Yeah, one out from shop, do you want anything from the shop? This isn't the most extreme example. It absolutely isn't the most extreme example. It gets much more extreme than that across a variety of English dialects. Given I always get a freaking name wrong. Thank you. Is a Bretonian opera singer. That suggests that Bretonia, despite being mostly based on high medieval France, has a culture of opera. That's why I didn't like her character. Okay, now, I know a lot of people love her. Okay,
I love her. She's great.
The first time I saw it, I was like, what the fuck? Bretonian opera? Where does this come from? Then later, I was like, okay, so clearly there's a Bretonian culture that I'm unaware of. And it's now developed, and this has to be incorporated in it. This is definitely a thing that has apparently happened. Okay.
I was gonna say that we got more Bretonian opera lore, I think, in the Sea of Claws book as well, because there's talk about a Bretonian opera singer in that.
Because they're a thing now. There's lots of details of Bretonian entertainment culture, and it tends to be, strangely enough, relatively high medieval in tone all the way through, but with a slightly stronger push on theatre. Theatre is dropped in most of the description of Bretonian culture. Indeed, in the few Warhammer Fantasy roleplay adventures set there, theatre is largely pulled out. The Musalon book, for example, there's an entire map of one of the theatres that are in there. So, yeah.
I will say, the thing that I do like about it is I do like that Bretonia is getting some more cultural things that aren't just knights hitting other knights.
I agree.
Like actual entertainment venues in like the major cities. It's like, oh, Bretonia is doing stuff.
Yeah,
right?
And it was nice to have something extra. It took me a wee while to get used to it. Because it isn't what I would have done. I wouldn't have raided somebody else's culture to make Bretonians different. Because opera is very much not a French thing.
It's very Italian. It's very Italian.
And it would have been really nice for them to have something that was uniquely theirs, rather than going, I'm going to make a Bretonian Tillian thing. Oh, fuck it, who cares? Mulch them together, throw it out. It would have been nice, I think, if they'd done something different, but totally get it. It's not my favorite choice.
Yeah, it could very well be that it ends up that like opera originates from Talea and it's just become popular in Bretonia in the last century or whatever.
I think that's exactly what it is, and I think that's fine. It just threw me at the time, and I have adapted it, and I have completely accepted it into my version of Bretonia now. But it's still an odd choice.
Yeah, I will say it was the most out of left, especially because she's a Vampire Coast character too. Like it is the most out of left field thing. But like you can see it of someone being like, oh, we need like a ghost character. Someone's like, oh, what about a siren? They're like, but how can we make a siren unique? And somebody in the back went, an opera siren, and everyone, oh, great idea, and then they ran with that. That's clearly how that went down. Yeah.
Why not Tillian? What?
They're like, well, Tillian's not a playable faction, so obviously we can't use Talea. Honestly, it wouldn't shock me if CA went, oh, well, she should be Talayan, and Games Workshop went, no, you can't use a Talayan.
Because we haven't got Tilia really.
Yeah, because we haven't got Tilia.
Yeah, it wouldn't surprise me either. Beside Black Crack and Carrick, 8 Peak says Feathered Freaks. Which lost hold do you think the dwarves would want to reclaim most for the good of Karazankor?
Mount Gumbad. Mount Gumbad has a very, 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 very unique metal that Games Workshop has, Brightstone, which GW has detailed out not only in the regular army books, but also it was a major part of the Warhammer Online Age of Reckoning thing. And it's one of the things that crosses universes. So it's not something that's unique to Warhammer Online. Mount Gumbad has a unique metal they would kill for, which are the Brightstone mines.
Yep, like that one. I know that Blood Bowl is not Warhammer, instead being an alternative timeline rather than a rhyme line, which suggests it's covered in ice. But do we know anything about what sports athletics are popular for the different races? Countries. We've got Midden Ball, which is a big organized sport played from pubs all the way up to stadiums in the Empire, particularly in the Bernabeu Stadium up in Middenheim.
And it's basically less ridiculous Blood Bowl.
It basically is less ridiculous Blood Bowl, although it's got some more ridiculous elements because it's based on the older sport Snot Ball, where they would bind a snotling up in leather and use that as the ball. And I made rules for this because I can't help myself, because it's too much fun. And indeed, I even made a rule saying this game's got legs, where the snotling ball runs off when it wakes up, which was super fun. And we did that on a Blood Bowl board. So they have their own version, and there's all manner of other types of sports, pub games, and things. If you want to get an idea of the ones in the Empire, there's a list of pub games at the end of Rough Nights and Hard Days, which also tells you about the great sport of dwile flunking, which is honestly ridiculous because it's real. In fact, while you go and do your little bit of answer, I'm going to get the video for dwile flunking because it's so stupid.
Yeah, what I will say is that if it exists in our world, it exists in Warhammer. And you can easily transpose any sport over. And it could be as good or ridiculous. Like, we know that among ogre culture, Noblars joust on the backs of pigs as a form of entertainment for themselves and for the ogres. You can imagine that the ogres would be into falconry. The ogre hunters with their big blood vultures. We know Colosseum fighting and all of the various games that you associate with the Colosseum are big into Leia, and also in elements over in the ogre kingdoms. We know that Bretonia is big into jousting and theatrical displays, so anything you can think of exists somewhere in the Warhammer world. Like, even like when you're dealing with a race where you wouldn't think it, like the Lizardmen. The Lizardmen do things to emulate combat scenarios. So like the game, the old Aztec game where you got the rings sticking out of the wall and you're trying to throw the ball through the hoop. Saurus and Skinks would play that game because it has practical application. So yeah, sports would be fucking everywhere.
And you'll find that Games Workshop is somewhat famous for taking an idea from the real world and translating it over. For example, Goblin Chariot Racing that Grom did when he took over Nuln. That would make a great mini game, okay, where all the Goblin Chariots are making their way around the city of Nuln over rackety bridges that they've made over the River Reich, which, admittedly, on the south side is 3 miles wide. That'd be one hell of a bridge. But let's not think about that. That's the north side, so rather than the south side. But yes, you name it, there are different versions of crazy gaming going on all over the place because people are going to people, and people enjoy having fun and pushing their limits in different ways.
For your information, Kuju is a Chinese sport similar to football, as in soccer. That could be in Cathay. Yeah, absolutely.
Absolutely. And I think that brings it nicely to an end.
Yes.
We have
to my thank you for all the support, guys. I mean, we've been literally
amazing.
Cruising
Thank
on
you so much.
Super chats the entire time.
Yeah, we have. It's been amazing. Really nice. And also thanks to Sotek for popping in.
Yeah, sorry we had to push back Afterlives. That was completely my fault. I was way too involved tearing apart tree branches.
Quite right too. But next week we will be doing Afterlife, so we'll be over on Lore Master Sotek's channel, and we are going to be diving deep into what happens after you die. And that's also going to be, note, a Wednesday stream, not a Saturday stream. And the reason for that is because we're going to have to make some shit up. Because some of it...
Yeah, it will be a very unique and fun stream because there are a lot of official things to discuss, but then there are a lot of things where, like, you feel like there should be official stuff, and then you look at it and you go, oh, there's nothing here.
Nothing here at all. What the? So, yeah, we're going to be making some stuff up as well, along with all of you. So that's going to make it a super unique stream. I think it's going to be quite different. And please, do remember, like, subscribe, both here and over on the Lore Master of The LAWmaster? The LAWmaster Space channels.
Fusion
it's
dance.
Late.
Yeah.
It's 2 o'clock in the morning over here. I can barely speak English anymore.
I also have a request of y'all, which I'm going to put this specifically on the LAWhammer and my Discord, but I'll be looking at both, which is that we would like to do something really cool and special for the Lorebeards that will be in person for. So ideas would be very welcome. Of, like, if y'all were gonna do, like, if it was the ultimate episode of Lorebeards, what would you want to see us talk about?
And yeah, we've got 2 episodes as well. So we've got one which is 100% lore facing. That's our Saturday episode, where we're going to be talking something that's lore based, something that's Warhammer. Where the Wednesday episode tends to be a bit more we make shit up, or we do something with the Warhammer world, or we look at something in a slightly different way, like we're going to be doing with the Afterlives. So what would you like that to be?
Yeah, so I will open a thread on my Discord, and hopefully we'll get one open on the LAWhammer Discord as well.
I can do that right now if you want.
Yeah, for ideas, because those would be really, really welcomed.
Yeah, indeed. I'm going to do the new post right now live.
Yeah, so am I.
Ideas for Lore Masters visit! Exclamation mark. What would you like to see Sotek and I discuss when he arrives here in sunny Scotland?
Sunny Scotland. Oh yeah, you totally go to Scotland from Texas for the sun.
Exactly. So what would you like to see? Remember, Saturday will be a lore stream, and Wednesday.
Sunday.
Did I say Saturday? Glad that I did. Thanks for correcting me. I'm glad I said that out loud. I'm going late mad, and Wednesday will be something ... different. What should they?
Oh,
be?
dude, Chris, I can tell you from personal experience of having been in both places, the sun in Texas hurts much more to speak on you. It is very painful to stand in a lot of the time. It's hot. It's a very hot sun here.
Now have that over on the Lawmaster. LAWhammer. Fuck it. It's so late. I can't even speak English. We have failed.
We're leaving.
We are leaving. It's time to go before I say something stupid.
And thank you for the 100 reviews. Thank you for hitting that.
It's really, really welcome. And of course, if you're coming at this stream later and you're going, the moment's passed, do you not need more reviews? We still need more reviews, because the more reviews we get over there, the more chance that it'll pick up their crazy algorithm and whatever the hell it does over there. I honestly don't know how it works properly, because I don't run it, but apparently 100's the minimum, and from this point onwards it'll make a difference. So if you're still out there going, well, will it make a difference? Yes, please do leave a review for Dark Deeds over a board game.
Yep.
Yes. Sorry, the Skaven's coming out. I think we should go.
Yep.
Thanks all. I shall see you all later. Until next.